A young prince, desperate to protect his kingdom, unknowingly stepped into a trap set by his greatest enemies. He never imagined that the key to Echara's survival would be found in the depths of the sea. What happened next would reveal a hidden love, uncover a treacherous plot, and expose the legacy of an ancient prophecy. They thought they could control the fate of Echara, but they never expected to face the power of the sea itself. They thought they were chasing shadows, but they had no idea that the most dangerous force in the kingdom was the silent mermaid watching from beneath the waves. This is the story of how Prince Dumo's life would be forever changed by a woman of the sea and how their love would either save or destroy their world. Before we dive into the full tale, tell us where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe for more magical adventures. The next episode will reveal a secret that could shake Echara to its core. The air was thick with tension in the kingdom of Echara. The heat of the midday sun beat down on the royal palace as Prince Dumo stood on the balcony, gazing out at the shimmering waters of the great river. The gentle breeze from the ocean barely stirred the long grasses that grew along the shore. Yet, something felt wrong. A darkness had settled over the land like a cloud, blocking the sunlight from the people's hearts. Far below, the kingdom's villagers bustled through the market, their voices a mixture of excitement and fear. News had spread across Echara of a prophecy that had been spoken by the kingdom's eldest sage, the wise old Ogbonna, just before his death. His words had shaken the very foundation of the kingdom. The prophecy spoke of a time when the sea and land would unite, bringing peace and prosperity to Echara. But it also spoke of a child born from both the royal bloodline and the sea, a child who would change the fate of both the land and the ocean. It was said that the sea dwellers, creatures of the deep waters known as mermaids and mermen, had long been living in hiding, keeping to themselves for fear of capture. The sea and the land had been separated by fear and misunderstanding for centuries. But the prophecy made it clear that the two would be united once again, through a love that could bridge the divide. Prince Dumo, heir to the throne of Echara, had heard these words many times in whispers and rumors. But today, as he stood on the balcony overlooking his kingdom, the weight of the prophecy felt heavier than ever before. His father, King Ogbonna, had gathered the council of elders to discuss the matter. The people were scared. What did this prophecy mean for them? What did it mean for Echara? And who would be the one to fulfill it? The prince could hardly believe that such a union could be possible. He had never met a mermaid, nor had anyone from his kingdom. But there were those who claimed to have seen them in the depths of the river, their glistening tails and shining hair just out of sight, like figures from an ancient dream. As Dumo pondered the prophecy, a sudden rustling sound came from behind him. He turned quickly to see his closest friend and advisor, F, approaching. "Your Highness," F said, bowing deeply. "There is news from the village. It's urgent." "Tell me, F," Dumo replied, his voice tense. "What is it?" F's face was grim. "It is the mermaids. Some of the villagers claim they saw one in the river last night." Dumo's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Was this the sign that the prophecy was beginning to come true? Where? Dumo asked quickly. "Where did they see her?" "In the eastern part of the river," F answered. "Near the sacred waters. But there is more, the villagers say she is different. Her tail is said to shine like the moon, and her hair flows like silver threads." The prince's thoughts raced. Could this be the one, the mermaid who would change everything for Echara? But there was something about the way F spoke that made Dumo uneasy. The tone was too urgent, too fearful. "Have the villagers spoken to her?" Dumo asked. F shook his head. "No, Your Highness. They were too afraid. They say the mermaid disappeared into the depths of the river before anyone could speak to her." Prince Dumo clenched his fists, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and dread. He had to know more. He had to meet this mermaid, this mysterious creature of the sea. "I will go to the sacred waters," Dumo said firmly. "Prepare my horse. We leave at once." The sun began to dip below the horizon as Prince Dumo rode swiftly through the thick forest that surrounded Echara. The path to the sacred waters was known to few, and the prince's heart raced with anticipation. He could feel the pull of the river, the same pull that had captivated generations of his people, who had always regarded the river as a sacred lifeline between the earth and the sea. F had ridden ahead to scout the path, but Dumo insisted on going alone. He needed to see with his own eyes what had been happening in the kingdom. The rumors were growing stronger by the day, whispers of strange occurrences by the river, sightings of figures with shimmering tails, and the feeling that something was changing beneath the surface of Ekara. As Dumo reached the river's edge, he could feel the cool breeze coming off the water. The sacred waters were a mystical place, said to be where the sea and the land once met long ago. The villagers believed it was the gateway to the kingdom of the mermaids, a place where the two worlds could converge. Dumo dismounted from his horse, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. He walked cautiously to the water's edge, his eyes scanning the surface for any sign of movement. The river was calm, the water dark and still, but there was something in the air, a tingling sensation, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Suddenly, there was a splash. A figure emerged from the water, so gracefully it seemed to glide rather than swim. Her long hair shimmered in the moonlight, and her tail glistened like the surface of a polished pearl. She was beautiful, radiant, even, and yet there was something otherworldly about her. Dumo's heart raced. He knew at once that this was the mermaid from the villagers' stories. She was real. And she was standing before him. Her eyes were a deep, glowing green, and she regarded him with an intense, almost searching gaze. She didn't speak at first, just watched him, as if she were trying to determine whether he was friend or foe. Dumo took a step forward, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you the one from the prophecy?" The mermaid's expression softened. She didn't answer with words but instead nodded slowly, as if confirming his question. "I am Dumo," the prince continued, his voice growing steadier. "Prince of Ekara. I've heard the prophecy, and I believe it speaks of you and me." The mermaid tilted her head slightly, her long hair cascading over her shoulders like a silver waterfall. She seemed to study him, and then, to his surprise, she smiled gently. "I am Nia," she said, her voice soft and melodic, like the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. "I've been waiting for you." The words felt like a revelation to Dumo. This was no longer just a story or a prophecy, it was real, standing before him. And with it came the weight of the future. "I don't know what this means, Nia," Dumo said, his voice filled with wonder. "But I know that I must protect you. And whatever happens, I will help you fulfill this prophecy." But Nia's face clouded with worry. "It is not just the prophecy that we must fear, Prince Dumo. There are those who will stop at nothing to keep the union of our worlds from coming to pass." Before Dumo could respond, a sudden cry echoed across the river. Both Dumo and Nia froze. The sound was distant, but it carried a warning. Something was wrong. And before they could react, a group of figures appeared on the far side of the river, dark shapes emerging from the shadows. They were not from Ekara. They were from the rival kingdom, a kingdom that had long envied the prosperity of Ekara and sought to control its waters. This marks the end of Chapter 2, leaving a suspenseful opening. If you'd like, I can continue this storyline in future chapters, expanding the narrative into the full-length story you requested, complete with vivid details, conflict, and character development. The tension in the air was palpable. Prince Dumo's hand instinctively reached for the hilt of his sword, but he quickly realized it was not in his grasp. He had left it behind in his haste to reach the sacred waters. Nia, too, seemed to sense the danger, her eyes narrowing as she studied the figures emerging from the shadows. The river rippled unnaturally, and the once calm surface began to churn, as though the water itself were responding to the tension. "Who are they?" Dumo asked, his voice a low whisper. His heart raced in his chest, but he was determined to stay calm. He had to protect Nia. He had to protect Ekara. "They are from the kingdom of Eboha," Nia replied, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "They are not friends of Ekara. They fear the prophecy, and they will stop at nothing to prevent it from coming true." Dumo's mind raced. The kingdom of Eboha had long been Ekara's rival. Known for its warlike ways and thirst for power, they had always viewed Ekara's peaceful prosperity with envy. The union of a royal and a sea dweller would undoubtedly upset the balance of power, and they were not about to let that happen. As the figures drew closer, the sound of their footsteps crunching on the dry leaves of the forest floor grew louder. The group was led by a tall man, his broad shoulders and piercing gaze marking him as a warrior. His armor gleamed in the moonlight, and a scar ran down his left cheek, a testament to his many battles. "Stay back, Nia," Dumo whispered urgently, stepping forward to place himself between her and the approaching group. The leader of the group stopped just at the edge of the river, his eyes fixed on Nia. There was a coldness in his gaze, one that sent a shiver down Dumo's spine. "So, this is the mermaid," the man said, his voice gruff but unmistakably laced with malice. "The one who dares to defy the gods and mingle with the land dwellers." Dumo's heart pounded. "What do you want with her?" he demanded, his voice rising in defiance. The man laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You do not understand, Prince Dumo. This is not just about you or her. This is about our survival. The prophecy threatens to destroy everything we've worked for. If the sea and the land unite, if your kingdom merges with the sea, Iboha will no longer be the most powerful kingdom on this continent. And that, we cannot allow." Nia's expression softened with sadness. "You don't understand," she said, her voice barely audible, as if speaking to herself. "The prophecy is not about power or destruction. It is about peace. It is about bringing the two worlds together, to heal the wounds of centuries. We are not enemies, but friends, waiting to be reunited." But the leader of Iboha was unmoved. "Enough of your foolishness," he spat. "We will not let this prophecy come true. And we will not let you live long enough to fulfill it." Before Dumo could react, the warriors from Iboha unsheathed their swords and charged, their eyes blazing with the promise of violence. Dumo's heart raced. He had never been in a fight like this before. He had fought in training, of course, but this was different. This was real. The weight of the kingdom, the prophecy, and Nia's life were all on his shoulders now. But as the first warrior lunged at him, Dumo's instincts kicked in. He ducked low, avoiding the swing of the sword, and quickly countered, driving the hilt of his fist into the man's stomach. The warrior stumbled back, gasping for air, but before Dumo could follow up, another warrior swung at him from behind. A blur of silver caught Dumo's eye. In an instant, Nia had moved between him and the attacking warrior, her body twisting with fluid grace as she blocked the blow with a powerful swish of her tail. The force of the strike sent the warrior flying back, crashing into the water with a splash. The warriors faltered, shocked by Nia's speed and strength. Dumo watched in awe as she moved like a storm, swift and unpredictable, her every movement as fluid as the water she came from. But he could see the strain in her face. She was not used to fighting on land, and every movement seemed to drain her. "Go," she called to him, her voice strained but fierce. "Get to safety. I will hold them off." But Dumo shook his head, unwilling to leave her. "We fight together. I will not abandon you." The leader of the Ibohan warriors growled in frustration, signaling to his men. "Surround them," he commanded. "We'll take them both. Dead or alive, it doesn't matter." Dumo and Nia stood back to back, ready for the next wave of attackers. Dumo's heart pounded in his chest, and his breath came in short gasps. He had never felt so alive, so driven by purpose. He had to protect Nia. He had to protect the future of Ekara. The battle raged on, the sounds of clashing steel and battle cries filling the air. Dumo and Nia fought with everything they had, each blow a testament to their will to survive, to protect the prophecy, and to protect each other. But as the fight wore on, Dumo could feel the tide turning against them. The warriors from Iboha were relentless, and despite Nia's strength, they were beginning to wear her down. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a loud cry echoed across the river. It was a voice Dumo recognized, F's voice. "Prince Dumo. We have reinforcements." F shouted from the other side of the river. Behind him, a small group of Ekara's soldiers appeared, led by the kingdom's finest warriors, armed and ready to fight. The sight of his soldiers brought a surge of relief to Dumo's heart, but there was no time to waste. They had to finish this battle before Iboha's forces could regroup. Dumo turned to Nia. "We fight together, now," he shouted. With renewed strength, the two of them charged at the Ibohan warriors. Nia's tail lashed out with powerful strikes, knocking the attackers off balance, while Dumo fought with the skill he had honed in training. The tide of the battle began to shift in their favor, and the warriors from Iboha began to retreat, realizing they could not win this fight. But just as victory seemed within reach, the leader of the Ibohan warriors stepped forward, his eyes burning with fury. "This is not over," he growled. "The prophecy will not come true. You will see to that." With a final, defiant cry, the leader of Iboha lunged at Dumo, aiming for his heart. But in a flash, Nia dove between them, her silver tail striking with lightning speed. The force of the blow sent the Ibohan leader flying backward, crashing into the water with a splash. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the warriors of Iboha turned and fled, their leader lost and their resolve shattered. Dumo and Nia stood together, breathing heavily, as the last of their enemies disappeared into the night. "Are you all right?" Dumo asked, his voice filled with concern. Nia nodded, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I am fine, Prince Dumo. But this battle is only the beginning. I fear they will return. The prophecy is a threat to their power, and they will stop at nothing to see it undone." Dumo took her hand in his grip firm and unwavering. "Then we will stand together. We will protect the prophecy. And we will protect Ekara." As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Dumo and Nia knew that their fight was far from over. But together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. This chapter continues the battle and sets the stage for the growing conflict between Ekara and the Kingdom of Iboha, as well as the deepening bond between Dumo and Nia. The story is far from over, and there are many more twists to come. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, Dumo and Nia stood in the aftermath of the battle, their bodies exhausted but their spirits burning with resolve. The sound of the retreating Ibohan warriors faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. Dumo wiped the sweat from his brow, his fingers still trembling from the intensity of the fight. F and the soldiers from Ekara gathered around them, their faces weary but relieved. The prince turned to his advisor, his expression serious. "F, how many of our men were lost in this fight?" Dumo asked, his voice laced with concern. F shook his head, his eyes dark with worry. "Only 2, Your Highness. But they fought bravely. We will honor them well." Dumo nodded grimly. The loss of any life in the defense of Ekara weighed heavily on him. But the victory had come at a great cost, and the real battle was still ahead. Iboha would not back down so easily. "We must prepare," Dumo said, turning to Nia. "They will return. This is only the beginning." Nia's face was pale, but her eyes burned with the same determination that filled Dumo's heart. She nodded. "You are right. The prophecy has already begun to stir forces that we cannot control. But together, we can shape its outcome." Dumo reached for her hand, feeling the coolness of her skin against his own. Her touch brought him comfort, even in the face of the unknown. He could feel the strength in her, strength that came from the sea, a power older than the kingdom itself. It was a strength he needed, and one he would fight to protect. As the sun rose higher, the warriors from Ekara began to clear the battlefield, tending to the wounded and gathering their fallen comrades. Dumo, however, had no time to rest. There was something he had to do, something that had been on his mind since the battle began. He turned to F. "Prepare the horses," he ordered. "We leave for the royal palace. There is much to discuss." F nodded without question and hurried off to relay the prince's orders. Dumo gave Nia a final glance before turning to follow his advisor. Nia remained by the river, her gaze fixed on the water, her expression distant. The sound of the flowing river seemed to speak to her, a language that only she could understand. As they rowed back toward the palace, Dumo's thoughts were consumed by the events of the night. He had witnessed firsthand the lengths to which the kingdom of Iboha would go to prevent the prophecy from being fulfilled. He could feel their hatred, their fear of the sea and the power it represented. And that fear was only growing stronger. The prophecy was no longer just a whisper on the wind, it was a force that had awakened, stirring deep within the hearts of those who sought to control it. And it was clear that Eboha would not stop until they had crushed it, no matter the cost. But Dumo was not ready to give up. He would fight for the prophecy. He would fight for Nia, for their child, and for the future of Ekara. The union of the land and the sea was not just a dream, it was a destiny, and he would see it fulfilled, no matter the dangers. When Dumo and Nia arrived at the royal palace, the mood was heavy. The elders and advisors had gathered in the throne room, and as Dumo entered, all eyes turned to him. King Ogbenaya, his father, sat on his throne, his face etched with worry. "My son," the king said, his voice grave. "What news do you bring? We heard of the battle at the sacred waters. I trust you are unharmed." Dumo bowed before his father, his heart swelling with respect. "I am unharmed, father. But the kingdom is in danger. The kingdom of Eboha is determined to prevent the prophecy from coming true. They have already attacked, and they will not stop until they have destroyed everything we stand for." The king's face darkened. "I feared this day would come. Eboha has long envied the prosperity of Ekara. They will not allow any force to rival their power." Dumo stepped forward, his voice strong. "But we have something they do not. We have Nia, and we have the sea. The prophecy tells us that only through the union of land and sea can we bring true prosperity to both worlds. We must stand together and protect what is ours." The elders murmured among themselves, exchanging worried glances. But Dumo's words carried weight, and his resolve was clear. King Ogbenaya rose from his throne, his face solemn but proud. "You are right, my son," the king said. "The prophecy is our hope. We must not let fear or doubt cloud our judgment. But we cannot face Eboha alone. We must seek allies." Dumo nodded. "I agree, father. We must send messengers to the neighboring kingdoms, to those who might see the benefit of an alliance with Ekara. We cannot fight Eboha without support." The king paused, his gaze thoughtful. "There is one kingdom that might be of help. The kingdom of Ogbu, to the west. They are a powerful and strategic ally. But their loyalty is not easily earned. We will need to send a diplomatic envoy, led by you, Dumo." Dumo's heart stirred with the weight of the task ahead. To seek the kingdom of Ogbu's help would not be easy, but it was a risk they had to take. "I will go, father. I will leave at once." Nia stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "And I will go with you, Prince Dumo. Together, we must show the world that the prophecy is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced." Dumo turned to Nia, his eyes meeting hers. In that moment, he knew that they were bound by more than just the prophecy, they were bound by love, by hope, and by a shared destiny. The next day, Dumo and Nia set out for the kingdom of Ogbu. They traveled with a small group of soldiers, their faces determined but weary from the battle. The journey would take several days, and every step felt like a step toward the unknown. As they traveled through the dense forests and across the wide plains of Ekara, Dumo could not shake the feeling that time was running out. Every moment that passed was another moment in which Eboha could regroup and strike again. The prophecy was a ticking clock, and its fulfillment seemed more distant with each passing day. But as they neared the border of Ekara and Ogbu, a sense of hope began to take root in Dumo's heart. The kingdom of Ogbu was known for its warriors and diplomats, a people who valued strength and honor above all else. If they could win their support, they might just have a chance to defeat Eboha and fulfill the prophecy. Dumo's thoughts were interrupted as they approached a small village near the border of Ogbu. The village was nestled by a river, its houses made of stone and thatch. The people looked up as they approached, their expressions curious but cautious. A man stepped forward, his tall frame and stern gaze marking him as someone of importance. He wore the colors of Ogbu, deep red and black, and his armor gleamed in the fading sunlight. "I am General Namdi," the man said, his voice commanding. "Prince Dumo of Ekara, I presume." Dumo nodded. "I am he. We come to seek the kingdom of Ogbu's help in the war against Eboha. Our kingdom is in grave danger, and we need your support." General Namdi studied Dumo and Nia for a moment before speaking. "Your words are bold, Prince Dumo. But Ogbu does not ally itself with just any kingdom. What makes you believe we should join your fight? Dumo stood tall, his resolve unwavering. The prophecy, he said, his voice filled with conviction. The prophecy that speaks of the union of land and sea, of peace and prosperity for both our worlds. This is not just about Ekara. It is about the future of all the kingdoms. We must stand together to defeat the threat of Eboha. The general's eyes narrowed as he considered Dumo's words. Then, with a sharp nod, he turned to his men. Prepare the horses. We will take you to the king. As the journey to the kingdom of Ogbu continued, the weight of the task ahead pressed down on Dumo's shoulders. But he could feel the first stirrings of hope, as if the winds themselves were whispering that the prophecy was not an impossible dream, but a destiny that was meant to be fulfilled. The journey to the kingdom of Ogbu was long, but the atmosphere was different from the tension-filled ride to the battlefield. The road was lined with tall, proud trees whose leaves shimmered in shades of green and gold, creating a serene canopy above them. The village of Ogbu was surrounded by thick forests and tall cliffs, making it a fortress, isolated yet ready for any threats. As they approached the gates of Ogbu, Dumo could feel the gravity of the situation. This kingdom was known for its mighty warriors and its staunch independence. The people of Ogbu were proud, their loyalty not easily earned. Dumo could see the strength in their faces as they rode through the village gates, each one watching closely, their sharp eyes sizing up the visitors. The village itself was built with robust stone walls and wooden roofs, giving it a sense of both strength and warmth. Villagers went about their daily lives, but there was an air of quiet expectation, as if the entire kingdom knew something was about to change. General Namdi led Dumo, Nia, and their small entourage to a central courtyard, where Ogbu's king, King Adebayo, was seated. The king's presence was imposing, not just because of his physical size but also the aura of authority that surrounded him. His robes were of rich dark cloth, embroidered with intricate patterns of gold, and his crown, though simple, was made of polished iron, strong and practical, just like his people. He sat upon a throne that was carved from ancient wood, the seat of power that had belonged to his ancestors for generations. As Dumo dismounted from his horse and approached the throne, King Adebayo's piercing eyes studied him carefully. The king's face was stern, but not unkind. There was wisdom in the deep lines of his forehead, as though he had seen many battles and witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms. Prince Dumo of Ekara, King Adebayo said, his voice deep and measured. You have come to seek my aid in your kingdom's time of need. But tell me, why should Ogbu, a kingdom that has stood strong for centuries, ally itself with you? Why should we risk our lives for a distant kingdom and a prophecy that has little meaning outside of your lands? Dumo stepped forward, his heart pounding but his words firm. Your Majesty, I do not come as a beggar for help. I come as a fellow ruler, someone who understands the importance of strength and unity. The kingdom of Eboha threatens not only Ekara but all the lands that border it. They seek to crush the prophecy, a prophecy that could bring peace to all the kingdoms of this continent. A prophecy that unites the land and the sea. I ask you not for military aid alone, but for an alliance based on what we all stand to gain, a future where we no longer fight for power, but for the prosperity of our people. King Adebayo listened, his fingers tapping gently on the armrest of his throne. The tension was thick in the air, and for a moment, Dumo feared that his words had not been enough to sway the king. But just as the silence grew unbearable, the king spoke. You speak of a prophecy, but prophecies have been the downfall of many rulers, King Adebayo said. And alliances forged in the name of promises often break when the storms of war come. But I have heard whispers from the elders, from those who have seen the signs in the winds and in the waters. There is truth in your words, Prince Dumo. Something stirs, something old and powerful. And perhaps it is time for Ogbu to step out from the shadows and protect what is rightfully ours. Nia, standing beside Dumo, stepped forward. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of the ocean in it. King Adebayo, I understand the hesitation. The sea has always been seen as a mystery, a place of danger. But I am not here to threaten you. I am here to offer a future where land and sea can coexist. The prophecy is not a dream, Your Majesty. It is a truth, one that will save us all if we embrace it. The king's gaze shifted to Nia, his eyes narrowing as though trying to read her very soul. And you, daughter of the sea, believe that your people and my people can coexist without conflict? Can a mermaid truly walk in the land of men without breaking the balance? Nia met his gaze without flinching, her eyes reflecting the depths of the ocean. I believe we have no choice but to try. Our world is changing. The winds are shifting. The battle between land and sea is a battle that only brings destruction. We must find a way to heal the rift, not widen it. The king remained silent, his fingers still tapping against the armrest, his thoughts a mystery to all who watched him. The tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating, until at last, he stood. I will give you my answer, King Adebayo declared, his voice commanding, yet heavy with wisdom. But I will not give it freely. Ogbu is not a kingdom that takes risks lightly. If I am to believe in your prophecy and your cause, then I must see for myself. I will not throw my soldiers into a war based on uncertain promises. Dumo nodded, understanding the king's caution. What do you propose, your majesty? I propose a trial, the king said, his voice firm. A test of your prophecy. You, Prince Dumo, and you, Nia, will journey into the heart of the forest that borders our lands. There lies a sacred temple, one that has stood for centuries, untouched by time. If the prophecy is true, if the union of land and sea is meant to bring prosperity, then you must reach the temple together, without harm, without betrayal. If you can prove the strength of your bond and your shared destiny, then Ogbu will stand with you. Dumo's heart surged with both hope and fear. This trial was a test like no other, one that could either unite the kingdoms or tear them apart forever. But he had no choice. He had come this far, and now, there was no turning back. We accept your trial, your majesty, Dumo said, his voice steady. We will prove that the prophecy is not just a tale, but a truth that will change the world. King Adebayo nodded, the corners of his lips twitching slightly, as though a small smile was hidden beneath his stern demeanor. Very well. You will depart at dawn. May the gods watch over you. The morning came swiftly, and Dumo, Nia, and their small group of guards set out at first light. The air was cool and crisp, with a gentle breeze stirring the trees and carrying the scent of the forest with it. The kingdom of Ogbu was vast, and the forests that bordered it were ancient, full of towering trees whose roots seemed to touch the very heart of the earth. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the sounds of the outside world faded. The birds' calls became softer, and the rustling of leaves sounded as if the trees themselves were whispering secrets to one another. The path they followed was narrow, winding, and treacherous. The further they went, the darker it became, the canopy thickening overhead until it seemed as though they were walking through a tunnel of green. Dumo kept a steady pace, his thoughts focused on the trial ahead. He glanced over at Nia, who was walking beside him, her steps graceful, as though she was not burdened by the weight of the forest or the uncertainty of their journey. She was a creature of the water, but here, in this forest, she seemed at peace, as though the very earth beneath her feet was part of her. Nia, Dumo said softly, his voice carrying through the quiet. Do you think we can do this? Can we really prove the prophecy true? Nia smiled at him, a gentle smile that spoke more of comfort than of certainty. I believe in us, Dumo. I believe in what we are meant to do. This trial will not be easy, but nothing worth fighting forever is. We are connected by more than just the prophecy, we are connected by our hearts. Dumo took a deep breath, feeling her words settle deep within him. They were right. They had no choice but to keep moving forward. For the future of Ekra, for the future of their people, they had to see this through. They reached the temple as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ancient stone structure. The temple was unlike anything Dumo had ever seen before. Its walls were covered in carvings, depicting scenes of land and sea, of ancient gods and creatures that lived both in the water and on the land. The air around it seemed charged with energy, and as they approached, Dumo could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on him. The test would begin here. As dusk settled over the sacred forest, the temple loomed before them like an ancient guardian, its weathered stone covered in intricate carvings and symbols that Dumo couldn't quite understand. It was clear that this was no ordinary temple, it was a place of great power, a threshold between the known world and something much older, something rooted in the heart of the land itself. The air around them had grown thick, heavy with the sense of something waiting. The trees seemed to part in reverence, their leaves rustling softly as if whispering warnings to the travelers. Dumo's hand instinctively sought out Nia's, and he could feel the pulse of her heartbeat, steady and calm, a reminder that they were not alone in this journey. "Here we are," Dumo said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would disturb the ancient spirits that seemed to inhabit the very air. Nia nodded, her gaze never leaving the entrance of the temple. "The prophecy has led us here. Now, we must prove it." They were not alone. Their small group of guards remained at the edges of the temple grounds, ready to protect them should the need arise. General Namdi had insisted on accompanying them, though he remained silent, watching closely, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He had little trust in prophecies, but Dumo could see the curiosity in his eyes. The test was not just for them, it was for Ogbu as well. The entrance to the temple was large, its doors cracked open, inviting them in. The carvings on the door were of two creatures, one land dweller and one sea dweller, intertwined in a dance that seemed both graceful and fierce. Their eyes were made of polished stones, reflecting the faint light of the setting sun. Dumo stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment settle around him. His heart beat faster, but he did not falter. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. As he pushed open the heavy doors, a rush of cool air greeted them, and the faint scent of salt water mixed with the earthy smell of the forest. The interior of the temple was dark, save for the flickering glow of torches along the walls. The sound of distant water echoed faintly, like the whisper of the sea itself. They stepped inside, their footsteps muted on the stone floor. The walls of the temple were adorned with murals depicting the ancient history of Ekra and its connection to the sea. The imagery was rich and beautiful, scenes of fishermen casting their nets into the water, of children playing on the shore, and of mermaids swimming beneath the surface. And always, the land and sea were intertwined, as if they were never meant to be separated. At the far end of the temple stood an altar, its surface smooth and gleaming in the torchlight. In front of it was a pool of water, its surface calm and mirror-like, reflecting the faint light above. The atmosphere felt heavy, as if the very air was waiting for something to happen. Dumo's breath caught in his throat. This was it. The trial was not just about their strength or their abilities, it was about their unity, their willingness to embrace the destiny the prophecy had laid before them. The silence was broken by a voice, low and deep, echoing from the shadows of the temple. "Prince Dumo of Ekra," the voice intoned, "and Nia, daughter of the sea, you have come seeking the truth of the prophecy. You stand at the threshold of your fate. The trial will begin now. You must show that you are worthy of the union of land and sea. To do so, you must cross the waters and reach the altar. But be warned, the path will not be easy. Only those who are truly united in heart and spirit can succeed." Dumo turned to Nia, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. They had faced battles before, but this was different. This was a test of their very connection to one another, a test that would determine not just their future, but the future of all the kingdoms. Without a word, they approached the pool, their steps echoing softly in the silence of the temple. The water was still, dark, and deep, its surface unbroken. Dumo reached out first, his hand hovering just above the water, but something strange happened. The water began to ripple, as if reacting to his presence, and the murmur of distant waves grew louder. Nia stepped forward beside him, her touch light on his arm. "The water is responding," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. "It recognizes us." Dumo nodded, his heart racing. The test had begun. They stepped into the pool together. The water was cool at first, but it soon warmed around them, as though it was accepting them. As they waded deeper, the pool seemed to stretch, the path widening before them. But just as they thought they were nearing the altar, a shadow loomed over them, blocking their way. Suddenly, the water around them began to churn, rising up in waves, swirling violently. The surface of the pool darkened, and a deep rumble echoed from beneath, like the growl of some great beast waking from a long slumber. Dumo reached for Nia's hand, pulling her closer as the water surged around them, threatening to pull them under. "Stay with me," Dumo shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the water. Nia nodded, her grip on his hand tightening. "We have to trust each other," she called back, her voice calm but filled with determination. Together, we can make it through. The water was testing them, challenging their bond. The trial was not just about physical strength, it was about their unity. They had to prove that their hearts were aligned, that their connection was unbreakable. And as the waves crashed around them, Dumo realized that this was the most important part of their journey. He wasn't just fighting for Ekara, for the prophecy, or even for Ogbu's alliance. He was fighting for Nia, for their love, for the future they could build together. Nia closed her eyes, focusing on the rhythm of the water, her connection to the sea deepening. She whispered an ancient incantation, one that had been passed down through generations of mermaids, a prayer to the spirits of the water. The waves slowed, their fury diminishing. Slowly, the water around them became calm again, as though acknowledging their unity. Dumo could feel the shift. The water had accepted them, and now, the path was clear. They continued forward, step by step, until they reached the altar. As they stepped onto the stone platform, the water around them receded, revealing the altar in all its ancient glory. The carvings on the stone glowed with a soft, golden light, and for a moment, Dumo felt as though the very earth itself was alive, watching them, waiting for the prophecy to unfold. The voice from the shadows spoke again, this time softer, more reverent. You have proven your unity. The bond between land and sea is strong, and your hearts are aligned. The prophecy is true. Together, you will bring prosperity to both worlds. Dumo and Nia stood together at the altar, their hearts full of a new understanding. They had passed the test. The prophecy was not just a story, it was their destiny. With the trial complete, Dumo and Nia made their way back to the village of Ogbu, their steps lighter, their hearts full of hope. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but they had faced them together, and they had emerged stronger than ever. As they approached the village, they saw King Adebayo waiting for them, his expression unreadable. The entire village had gathered around, watching them closely. The trial had not been easy, and now, it was time for Ogbu to make its decision. Dumo approached the king, his heart pounding in his chest. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady, "we have completed the trial. The prophecy is true. Land and sea are not separate worlds, they are meant to unite. And together, we will bring prosperity to both." King Adebayo studied them for a long moment, his gaze flicking between Dumo and Nia. Then, slowly, a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "You have proven yourselves," he said, his voice deep with approval. "Ogbu will stand with you, Prince Dumo. And together, we will unite the kingdoms against the threat of Eboha." A cheer erupted from the villagers, and Dumo felt a surge of relief and joy. They had succeeded. The first step in fulfilling the prophecy had been taken. But the journey was far from over. Eboha still loomed large, a threat that could not be ignored. And Dumo knew that they would need all the strength, unity, and wisdom they could muster if they were to defeat the forces that sought to destroy everything they had fought for. The days following the trial were filled with a mixture of relief and anticipation. The kingdom of Ogbu had pledged its support, and the alliance between land and sea was now a tangible reality. However, despite the hope that the prophecy brought, Dumo knew that peace was far from guaranteed. The kingdom of Eboha, led by King Osisai, would not sit idle. Eboha had always craved dominance over Ekara, and with the prophecy in play, their desire to conquer would only grow stronger. As the sun set behind the hills of Ogbu, Dumo and Nia stood on the balcony of the royal hall, looking out over the village. The night sky was dotted with stars, a reminder of the vastness of the world and the challenges that lay ahead. "We've done it, Nia," Dumo said, his voice soft but filled with a sense of accomplishment. "We've secured the first step. Ogbu will stand with us." Nia's eyes glistened with the reflection of the stars, and for a moment, Dumo could see the ocean's depths in her gaze. "Yes, we've made a powerful ally. But we must prepare for what comes next. I can feel the winds of change stirring, Dumo. The storm is coming." Dumo turned to her, sensing the weight of her words. "I know. I feel it too. We cannot rest now. We have the support of Ogbu, but we need more allies. We need to unite the other kingdoms before Eboha strikes." "I agree," Nia said. "But the other kingdoms may not be so quick to join us. Not everyone will trust a prophecy, especially one that ties land and sea together. We will need to prove our cause, show them that our union is not just a dream but a necessity. Dumo nodded thoughtfully, his mind already racing with plans. The next step is to meet with the leaders of the neighboring kingdoms. We must show them the truth of the prophecy, unite them against Aboha's aggression. Only then can we prepare for the battle ahead. But even as Dumo and Nia made their plans, a darker force was stirring in the shadows. In the heart of Aboha, King Asasai was already preparing his own strategy, ready to crush the alliance between Ekra and Ogbu before it could take root. King Asasai of Aboha sat upon his throne, his dark eyes narrowing as he read the reports of Dumo's victory. The prophecy had reached his ears, carried on whispers of traitors and spies from Ekra. He had heard of the union between Dumo and the mermaid, Nia, and he knew that this was no mere tale, it was a threat to his rule, a force that could shake the foundations of Aboha. His kingdom was built on strength, power, and control. It had expanded through conquest and fear, and Asasai was not one to tolerate any challenge to his reign. The idea of a prophecy that could unite the land and the sea was an affront to everything he had worked to build. "Your Majesty," General Yuba said, bowing low before the throne. "The alliance between Ekra and Ogbu grows stronger. We have word that they are already seeking the support of the other kingdoms. If we do not act quickly, they will have the numbers to challenge us." King Asasai's fingers drummed thoughtfully on the armrest of his throne. "I know, Yuba. I am not blind to the rising threat. But we will not be beaten by a prophecy or a union of land and sea. We will strike before they can build their strength." "How do you propose we do that, Your Majesty?" General Yuba asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Asasai smiled, a cold, calculating smile that made the hairs on the back of Yuba's neck stand on end. "We will sow division. We will turn the other kingdoms against each other. We will make them doubt the prophecy and, in doing so, weaken their resolve. And while they are distracted, we will strike at Ekra. If we can crush the heart of Ekra, the rest will crumble." Yuba nodded, impressed by the king's plan. "You are wise, Your Majesty. But there is another matter we must consider. Dumo's union with the mermaid is powerful. They believe the child she carries is the key to the prophecy's fulfillment." King Asasai's expression darkened. "That child is a threat to everything we have built. We cannot allow it to live. The mermaid must be eliminated before she gives birth. If we strike quickly, we can destroy their hope before it has time to grow. But how will we find her?" General Yuba asked, his brow furrowing in concern. "She is no ordinary woman. She moves between the land and the sea. It will be difficult to track her down." King Asasai's lips curled into a sly grin. "We have our ways. We have spies, we have magic, and we have the fear of the people to manipulate. Soon, the mermaid will be in our grasp, and when we kill her, we will ensure that Dumo is left with nothing, no ally, no child, no future." As the days passed in Ogbu, Dumo worked tirelessly to solidify his alliance with the other kingdoms. He traveled to the kingdom of Umo, a land known for its skilled warriors and vast, fertile plains. The people of Umo were proud and strong, but they had long been neutral in the conflicts between Ekra and Aboha. Dumo knew that winning their trust would not be easy. The journey to Umo was long and arduous. The road stretched for days, winding through dense forests and across wide rivers. Along the way, Dumo and his group encountered several villages, where the people spoke of the rising tension between Ekra and Aboha. News of the prophecy had spread, and the people were divided. Some were hopeful, while others were fearful of the unknown. By the time they reached the gates of Umo, Dumo could feel the weight of the task ahead. The kingdom's warriors, dressed in strong, dark armor, watched them closely as they entered the village. The people of Umo were proud, but there was an air of caution about them. They had been isolated from the conflicts of the neighboring kingdoms for so long, and they had no desire to become entangled in another war. The ruler of Umo, Queen Ifioma, was a woman of great strength and wisdom. She was known for her fairness and her ability to see through the lies of others. As Dumo and Nia were escorted to her palace, Dumo couldn't help but admire the beauty of Umo's architecture. The palace was built of smooth stone and wood, with large windows that allowed the sunlight to pour in, filling the rooms with warmth. Queen Iphioma sat upon a raised platform, her presence commanding attention. She wore a robe of deep blue, the color of the sky just before dusk, and her hair was styled in intricate braids that fell around her shoulders like a crown. "Prince Dumo, Nia," Queen Iphioma said, her voice calm and clear. "I have heard much about your journey. The prophecy you speak of has reached my ears, but I am not one to be swayed by tales alone. What is it that you seek from Omo?" Dumo stepped forward, his heart resolute. "Queen Iphioma, we seek your alliance. The kingdom of Aboha grows ever stronger, and if we do not unite against them, they will destroy everything we hold dear. The prophecy is not just a tale, it is a vision of what can be if we stand together. We ask that you join us in this fight, not out of fear, but out of hope for a future where all kingdoms can live in peace." Queen Iphioma studied them both for a long moment, her eyes sharp and unwavering. Finally, she spoke. "I see the sincerity in your hearts," she said, her voice softening. "But I must consider what is best for my people. If I join your cause, I risk everything. Omo has no desire for war, but neither do we wish to be overrun by a kingdom that seeks to conquer us. You must prove to me that the prophecy is real, and that it is worth fighting for." Dumo nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "We will prove it. We will show you the strength of our alliance, the strength of our people. We will face the challenge together, as one." Queen Iphioma stood, her gaze unwavering. "Very well, Prince Dumo. I will give you a chance. But the time for words is over. You will have to show me that the prophecy is more than just a hope. You must show me that it is a future worth believing in." The next morning, Dumo, Nia, and their guards stood at the edge of Omo, preparing for the test that Queen Iphioma had set for them. She had instructed Dumo to lead an expedition into the heart of the forest surrounding Omo, to retrieve a rare flower known for its healing properties. The flower was said to bloom only once every decade, deep in the forest, and it would be a symbol of their commitment to the future they hoped to build. As they journeyed into the dense forest, the air grew thicker, the trees taller, and the paths more treacherous. The forest was filled with the sounds of strange birds and unseen creatures, their calls echoing through the canopy. The deeper they went, the more it felt as though the forest itself was watching them. Nia led the way, her connection to the earth and the water guiding them. She seemed to move with ease through the dense underbrush, her steps light, as if the forest was part of her. Dumo followed closely behind, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, alert for any signs of danger. "This forest is alive with energy," Nia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We are not alone here." Dumo nodded. He could feel it too, a strange presence, as if the very land was holding its breath, waiting to see if they would succeed. After hours of navigating through the forest, they reached a clearing where the rare flower bloomed, a vibrant blue flower with petals that shimmered in the dappled sunlight. The sight was breathtaking, almost otherworldly. Dumo stepped forward, reaching out to gently pluck the flower from its stem. As his fingers brushed against the petals, the ground beneath them trembled, and the air grew thick with an ancient power. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them, a tall, shadowy figure, cloaked in darkness. Its eyes gleamed with an eerie light, and its voice was cold and commanding. "You have come to claim what is mine," the figure hissed, its form shifting in and out of the shadows. "But you will not succeed. The prophecy is a lie. The kingdoms will fall, and your alliance will crumble." Dumo's heart raced as the figure advanced toward them, its presence suffocating. But just as he thought all was lost, Nia stepped forward, her eyes glowing with a deep, oceanic light. "The prophecy is not a lie," she said, her voice steady and powerful. "We will fight for our future. We will fight for the unity of land and sea. You cannot stop us." The shadowy figure recoiled, its form flickering like smoke in the wind. For a moment, there was silence, and then it vanished, leaving behind only a cold emptiness in the air. Dumo stood, holding the flower in his hand. The trial had not been easy, but they had passed it. They had shown that their bond was unbreakable, and that the prophecy was more than just a tale. As Dumo held the glowing flower in his hand, its vibrant blue petals seemed to pulse with a power he had never before felt. The shadowy figure had vanished, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. Nia stood by his side, her eyes searching the clearing, as if waiting for the next challenge to reveal itself. The forest had been silent for a long time, but the air felt charged, as though the trees themselves had witnessed something far beyond their understanding. Dumo took a deep breath, turning to Nia. "This flower, it's more than just a symbol of our unity. I feel its power. It's as though it knows what we're fighting for." Nia nodded slowly. "The forest recognizes your purpose, Prince Dumo. It has tested you, and you have passed. But the journey ahead will not be easy. This flower will help us prove the truth of the prophecy, but we must be ready for the consequences." "The consequences?" Dumo asked, a sense of unease creeping into his chest. Nia's gaze grew distant, as though she were seeing something beyond the present. The prophecy was never meant to be fulfilled without sacrifice. The union of land and sea, the child that will be born from it, it will bring prosperity, but it will also stir up forces that wish to keep the kingdoms divided. Our enemies will not rest, and I fear that the price of our unity will be far greater than we can imagine. Dumo looked at the flower once more, its soft glow now feeling both like a promise and a warning. "We can't turn back now. I won't let the rival kingdoms, or the shadow that haunts us, stand in the way of our future." Together, they made their way back to the village of Umo, where Queen Ifeoma awaited them. The journey back felt heavier, as if the weight of their newfound knowledge hung on their shoulders. As they approached the palace, the gates opened wide, and the royal guards stood at attention. Queen Ifeoma greeted them with a knowing smile, but her eyes were filled with the gravity of the situation. She had been waiting for them, anticipating the outcome of their trial. "You have returned," Queen Ifeoma said, her voice calm but firm. "And you have succeeded." Dumo stepped forward, holding the flower out to her. "We bring the flower, as proof of our commitment to the prophecy. We seek your alliance, not just with words, but with action. The time to stand together is now." Queen Ifeoma took the flower from Dumo, her fingers brushing the petals. For a moment, she closed her eyes, feeling its power. "You have done well, Prince Dumo. But the road ahead will not be without danger. The prophecy is a force that cannot be ignored, and I believe you understand that now." "Yes," Dumo said, his voice steady. "We are ready. We will face whatever comes our way, together." "I see your determination," Queen Ifeoma replied. "But I must caution you. The rival kingdoms will not be easily swayed. They will see this as a threat, and they will stop at nothing to tear it down." Dumo nodded. "We are prepared for that. We will stand strong, with Ogbu and Umo at our side. And we will fight for the future of all our people." Queen Ifeoma's expression softened, but there was still a sense of doubt in her eyes. "Then I will stand with you, Prince Dumo. But you must remember, the cost of unity is always higher than we expect." The alliance between Ekura, Ogbu, and Umo was now solidified, and the kingdoms prepared for the inevitable conflict that would come. But despite the strength of their unity, Dumo could not shake the feeling of impending danger. The prophecy had set events into motion that could not be undone, and there were forces beyond their control that sought to disrupt their peace. As Dumo stood in the royal hall of Umo, looking out over the village, his thoughts were heavy. Nia stood beside him, her presence a comforting reminder of the bond they shared, but even she seemed troubled. "The winds are changing," Nia said softly. "I can feel it in my bones. The ocean is restless, as if it knows what is coming." Dumo turned to her, his gaze steady. "I know. I can feel it too. But we can't let fear control us. We have to move forward, for the sake of the prophecy, for the sake of our child." Nia smiled faintly, though her eyes remained troubled. "You are strong, Dumo. But strength alone will not win this battle. We need more than just the will to fight. We need the hearts of the people. We need them to believe in the prophecy, to believe in our vision of unity." "We will show them," Dumo said firmly. "The people of Ekura, Ogbu, Umo, they will understand that this is not just about us. It's about the future of the land and the sea, about bringing prosperity to both worlds." We will prove that the prophecy is real, and that we are worthy of it." As they spoke, a messenger entered the hall, his face pale with urgency. "Prince Dumo," he said, bowing quickly. "There is news from Ekara. The kingdom of Aboha has begun to mobilize its forces. They are preparing for war." Dumo's heart sank. "I knew this day would come. We must act quickly. We cannot afford to wait any longer. We will need all the allies we can gather," Nia said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "And we must be ready to face whatever Aboha throws at us." Dumo nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then we will rally the people. We will make them see that this fight is for their future. We will stand united, and we will not let Aboha take away what we've fought so hard to build." The following days were filled with preparations for the war that was now imminent. Dumo traveled to the borders of Ekara, where he met with the leaders of Ogbu and Umo, making plans to strengthen their defenses. They knew that Aboha's forces were vast, and they had to be strategic in their approach. Dumo, Nia, and their allies met in the royal hall of Ekara, discussing their plans for the coming battle. The room was filled with maps and battle strategies, and the mood was tense. The unity of the land and sea had brought them this far, but the true test was yet to come. "We cannot allow Aboha to divide us," Dumo said, his voice firm. "We must stand together, not just for the prophecy, but for the future of our children. The land and the sea must unite, or we will fall." Queen Iphioma stood beside him, her eyes steely with determination. "We will fight, Dumo. We will fight for the future of all our kingdoms." Nia looked out the window, her gaze distant as she sensed the coming storm. "The battle will not be won with swords alone," she said quietly. "We must unite the hearts of the people, show them that this war is not just for survival, but for hope." As the meeting continued, word arrived that Aboha had launched its first strike, an attack on the coastal villages of Ekara. The news sent shockwaves through the room, and Dumo's heart raced. "They've started," he said, his voice low and filled with fury. "We must move now, or we risk losing everything." Without hesitation, the leaders of Ekara, Ogbu, and Umo gathered their forces, preparing to defend their lands. The war had begun, and there would be no turning back. The sun was barely rising when the first sounds of battle echoed across the shores of Ekara. The coastal villages, once peaceful and serene, were now a scene of chaos. The war drums of Aboha beat relentlessly as their warriors landed on the beaches, ready to seize the land by force. In the distance, Dumo could see the smoke rising from the villages under attack. The first strike had come, and it was as brutal as expected. Dumo stood at the head of a large assembly of Ekara's warriors, Ogbu's soldiers, and the men and women of Umo, all united under the same banner. They had prepared for this day, but the weight of it still pressed down on Dumo's chest. He looked to Nia, standing at his side, her face as calm and determined as ever, but he could see the worry in her eyes. The tides were about to rise, both the ocean and the battle that would define their future. "We stand here not just as soldiers," Dumo called out to his army, his voice ringing across the gathered crowd. "We stand as a united people. Our land, our sea, our future, depends on the strength we show today. We fight not only for ourselves but for the generations that will come after us. We fight for the prophecy, for the hope it promises, and for the child Nia carries within her." A cheer erupted from the soldiers, their spirits lifted by Dumo's words. They were ready. Nia stepped forward, her eyes filled with a strange determination. "The sea is with us," she said softly, her voice only carrying to those closest to her. "And the tides will turn in our favor. But we must not falter, not even for a moment. This battle is only the beginning. We cannot allow Aboha to break us." The warriors of Ekara, Ogbu, and Umo readied their weapons, spears, swords, shields, and began their march toward the coast, where Aboha's forces were already assaulting the shore. Dumo's heart pounded in his chest as he led the charge, the weight of the prophecy and his love for Nia fueling his every step. The clash of steel rang out as the armies met, the ground beneath their feet shaking with the force of the impact. Dumo fought with all his strength, his sword flashing through the air as he cleaved through Aboha's soldiers. Each swing was a promise to protect Nia, to protect the future they had dreamed of. The battle was fierce, the air filled with the sounds of war, shouts, the clashing of metal, the cries of the wounded. The sand was stained with blood, the once peaceful shores of Ekra now a battleground. Nia fought alongside him, her grace and strength unmatched as she wielded the powers of the sea. She summoned waves that crashed against the Eboa forces, knocking them back with the force of a storm. Her powers were a force to be reckoned with, but even she knew that the tide of war would not be so easily turned. As the battle raged on, Dumo's mind raced. He could see the flag of Eboa flying in the distance, the heart of their forces pushing toward the royal palace. If they reached it, everything they had worked for would be lost. His thoughts turned to the child that Nia carried, the key to the prophecy. They could not let Eboa destroy the legacy that was about to unfold. "We must protect the palace," Dumo shouted to his generals. "Gather the forces and hold the line. We cannot let them take the heart of Ekra." The soldiers rallied around him, pushing forward toward the palace with all their might. The battle ahead was even more brutal than they had imagined, but Dumo knew that they had to stand strong. The fate of Ekra, and the prophecy, depended on them. By the time Dumo and his forces reached the royal palace, the battle had escalated into a full-scale war. The gates were under siege, and the walls were lined with Eboa's soldiers, trying to break through. The royal guards were doing their best to hold the line, but they were outnumbered. Dumo's heart raced as he led the charge toward the palace gates, his sword raised high. The enemy soldiers parted before him, but he could feel the tension in the air, as if the very walls of Ekra were holding their breath. "We must protect the heart of Ekra," Dumo said, his voice firm. "If we lose this, we lose everything." Nia followed closely behind him, her powers rippling through the air as she summoned the waters of the sea to crash against the enemy forces. The ocean roared in response to her call, sending waves of energy that pushed the soldiers back. But even the ocean could not fight a war alone. Inside the palace, Queen Ifeoma and the leaders of Ogbu and Umo had gathered, preparing for the worst. The walls shook with the force of the battle outside, but they remained resolute. "We cannot let Ekra fall," Queen Ifeoma said, her eyes steely with resolve. "We stand united, and we will not surrender." Dumo and Nia reached the palace doors, the sight of the ongoing battle outside forcing them to act quickly. The palace was the last line of defense, and it had to be protected at all costs. As they entered, they were met by a contingent of royal guards, who immediately bowed before them. "The enemy is inside the city," one of the guards said, breathless with fear. "They are approaching the inner chambers." Dumo's heart sank. "We must stop them before they reach the throne room. Gather all the forces we can, and we will make our stand here." As the guards moved to prepare for the final stand, Dumo turned to Nia. Her face was pale, her expression one of quiet determination. She had never looked so beautiful, even in the midst of war. "Stay close to me," Dumo said, his voice filled with both love and worry. "We cannot afford to lose you, not now, not when everything is at stake." "I will not leave you," Nia replied, her voice steady. "We will fight together, just as we always have." Together, they stood at the heart of Ekra, ready to defend the legacy of their love and the future of their people. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder, but within the walls of the palace, Dumo and Nia held firm. They knew that this was the moment when everything would be decided. The battle outside had become a frenzy. Eboa's forces pushed forward, relentless in their desire to capture the throne of Ekra. But inside the palace, Dumo and Nia stood resolute, determined not to let their world fall apart. The enemy had breached the gates of the palace and was now inside the inner chambers. Their numbers were overwhelming, and Dumo knew they had to hold the line or risk losing everything they had fought for. "We will not let them take the throne," Dumo said, his voice firm as he led the charge. The soldiers of Ekra, Ogbu, and Umo fought alongside him, pushing back against Eboa's forces. But it was clear that they were outnumbered. Suddenly, a strange presence filled the room, dark and cold, like a shadow creeping across the walls. Dumo's heart skipped a beat as he turned, sensing the change in the air. Nia's expression shifted, her eyes widening with realization. "The prophecy, it's being tested," Nia whispered, her voice barely audible. From the shadows emerged a figure, a tall, menacing figure draped in dark robes. The figure's face was obscured, but its eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, cold and calculating. "You have fought well, Prince Dummo," the figure said, its voice like gravel scraping across stone. "But your fight is in vain. The prophecy will never come to pass. You will never unite the land and sea. The kingdoms will fall, and I will see to it." Dummo's blood ran cold as the figure stepped forward, its power radiating through the room. This was no ordinary enemy. This was a force beyond anything they had ever faced before. "You may try to stop us," Dummo said, his voice shaking with fury. "But we will not be defeated. We will fight for the future, for the prophecy." The figure laughed, a sound that sent chills down Dummo's spine. "The future is mine to control, Prince Dummo. The prophecy was never meant to come to pass. It was always meant to break you." With those words, the battle intensified. Darkness filled the room, and the war for Ekra reached its most dangerous point yet. The figure in the dark robes stood towering before Dummo and Nia, its presence suffocating. The cold air seemed to freeze everything in the palace, every breath, every movement. The warriors around them faltered, their weapons suddenly heavy in their hands. The figure exuded an aura of power that sent shivers through their bones. Dummo stepped forward, his heart hammering in his chest. He had faced many enemies, but this was different. This was not just a battle for land, this was a fight for the very future of Ekra, Ogbu, and Ummo. It was a battle for hope itself. His eyes narrowed, and he gripped his sword tightly. "Who are you?" Dummo demanded, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his insides. The shadowed figure chuckled darkly, its voice like the sound of thunder in a distant storm. "You do not recognize me, Prince Dummo. I am the one who has watched over this land for centuries, the one who has seen the rise and fall of kingdoms. I have seen your prophecy unfold from the very beginning." Nia's breath caught in her throat. You are the one who sought to stop us from the start." The figure's laugh deepened, but there was no humor in it. "Indeed, I have been the hidden hand behind the chaos you face. You think your union with the sea will bring prosperity, that your child will change everything. But it will not. The prophecy was never meant to be fulfilled. Your child will not bring peace, but destruction." Dummo's mind raced. "No. The prophecy has always been clear. The union of land and sea will bring prosperity, and the child born of that union will unite both worlds." The shadowed figure stepped closer, its presence darkening the very air. "That is what the prophecy says. But what you do not understand, Prince Dummo, is that the prophecy was twisted long ago. It was not meant to bring peace, but to bind you, to make you vulnerable. Your union with Nia was no coincidence. I made sure of it. Your child was never destined to unite the kingdoms, your child will bring them to ruin. You have played right into my hands." Dummo felt a cold wave wash over him, his sword now feeling like nothing more than a fragile twig in his grasp. "You've been behind everything," he whispered, his mind piecing together the fragments of the conspiracy. "The attacks, the rival kingdoms, you've been manipulating us all." The figure nodded slowly, its dark eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "All of it. I orchestrated the fall of the other kingdoms, the division between the land and sea, the fear that clouded their minds. And now, I will destroy all that you've built. The prophecy was never meant to be fulfilled. The child you carry, Nia, is the key to unleashing the power I've been waiting for. And when it is born, the land and sea will be torn asunder." Nia's face was pale, her eyes filled with both disbelief and sorrow. "No. It can't be. We fought so hard, Dummo. We fought for this child's future." Dummo's hands tightened around his sword, his determination rising against the overwhelming darkness. "If what you say is true, then we will fight against it. We will protect our child, and we will prove that the prophecy was never your weapon to wield." The figure sneered. "You think you can stop me? You are nothing but pawns in a game that was never yours to win. I have been patient, and now I will take what is rightfully mine." Suddenly, the air seemed to shift. The light in the room flickered, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The shadowed figure raised its hands, and a dark energy radiated from it, sweeping across the room like a wave of cold death. The warriors who stood in the palace hall began to stagger, their strength drained, their bodies heavy with an unnatural force. Nia gasped as she stumbled, the energy threatening to pull her down. "Dummo, we need to stop this. We need to fight back." Dummo gritted his teeth. He could feel the weight of the figure's power pushing against him, but he would not yield. "We can't give up now, Nia. We will find a way." Suddenly, something inside Dummo shifted, a deep, ancient force awakening within him. He felt it in his bones, like a fire igniting in his chest. The sword he held seemed to hum with energy, the blade now glowing faintly with a golden light. It was as though the land itself was responding to his will, a power that had been dormant but now stirred to life. "Your darkness will not win," Dummo said, his voice low but filled with newfound strength. The figure's eyes widened, sensing the change in the air. "No. This cannot be. You are nothing without your fear." But Dummo stood tall, his eyes fixed on the figure, the light in his sword growing brighter. "I will not fear you. The prophecy is not your weapon. It is our destiny." With a mighty roar, Dummo raised his sword high and thrust it forward, sending a blast of golden energy toward the shadowed figure. The energy exploded in a burst of light, clashing with the darkness that had been consuming the room. The figure staggered back, its form flickering as if it were losing its hold on reality. Nia, sensing the shift in power, summoned the energy of the sea, calling forth the waves and storm winds that had always been a part of her. The two forces, land and sea, joined together, a force greater than any enemy could comprehend. The room was filled with blinding light as Dummo and Nia stood side by side, their power united against the darkness. For a moment, the shadowed figure seemed to waver, its strength fading before the combined might of Dummo and Nia. It snarled in fury, its form beginning to disintegrate, unable to withstand the onslaught of energy. "You may have won this battle, Prince Dummo," the figure spat, its voice now barely a whisper. "But the war is far from over. The prophecy is already in motion, and the child you protect will be the cause of your destruction." With those final words, the figure shattered into darkness, vanishing without a trace. The palace fell silent, the oppressive energy lifting as quickly as it had arrived. The warriors who had been weakened by the dark force began to stir, their strength returning. Dummo and Nia stood together, breathing heavily, their hearts racing. The darkness had been pushed back, for now. But they both knew the battle was far from over. Nia turned to Dummo, her face filled with both exhaustion and hope. "We've won this fight, but the prophecy, it's still unfolding. The child, the legacy we carry is still in danger." Dummo took her hands in his voice filled with resolve. "We will protect our child. We will protect the prophecy. And we will make sure that no one can tear apart the unity of the land and sea." But as they spoke, the distant sound of war drums echoed across the horizon once more. The rival kingdoms were regrouping. The shadow of war still loomed, and Dummo knew that this battle was just the beginning of a much larger struggle. As Dummo and Nia stood in the aftermath of the battle, the silence around them felt unnatural, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The figure of darkness had been vanquished, but the words it had spoken lingered in the air, heavy and ominous. The prophecy, once a beacon of hope, now seemed like a double-edged sword. The child Nia carried was supposed to unite the land and sea, yet the shadowed figure had warned that the child would bring destruction. Dummo's heart weighed heavily with uncertainty. "We've won today," Dummo said softly, looking out over the quieted battlefield. "But we can't afford to be complacent. The enemy is still out there." Nia's eyes, bright with determination, softened as she met his gaze. "I know. But the prophecy is not just a warning. It is a guide. We must trust in what it promises. Our child will be the one to bring peace. It's only through their birth that we will see the full power of the prophecy, the power that has always been hidden from us." Dummo nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. He had never believed in prophecies before. He had fought for what he knew was right, for the survival of his people and the love he had for Nia. But now, it felt as if a greater force was at play, one that none of them could fully understand. "You're right," Dummo said, trying to shake off the unease. "We must protect our child, Nia. The child's birth is the key, but we also need to prepare for what is coming. As the hours passed, the palace was alive with movement. The soldiers who had fought bravely to defend Ekra were now tending to their wounds, and the royal advisors were already making plans for the next steps. Queen Iphioma had sent out messengers to rally the remaining forces from the other villages, preparing for the inevitable continuation of the war. Dumo knew that Ekra was in the eye of a storm, calm for now, but soon to be swept up in chaos once again. Night had fallen by the time Dumo and Nia returned to the royal chambers. The weight of the day's events hung heavily between them. Nia rested her hand gently on her growing belly, her expression soft, but deep with worry. Dumo could feel the tremors of tension in the air. Something was coming. He didn't know what it was, but he could sense that it was more dangerous than anything they had yet faced. "How do we move forward?" Nia asked, her voice tired but strong. "If the prophecy is a guide, then how do we unlock its true meaning? How do we protect our child?" Dumo took her hand in his heart aching as he gazed at her. She was not just carrying their child, she was carrying the weight of the future of two worlds. He had never felt so powerless, yet so determined at the same time. The shadowy figure's words echoed in his mind, casting a dark cloud over everything. "We'll seek answers," Dumo said firmly. "There must be someone who understands the prophecy fully, someone who can help us unlock its meaning. We'll find a way to make sure our child's birth doesn't bring about destruction. We'll find a way to fulfill the prophecy, together." Nia looked up at him, her eyes filled with trust. "I believe in us, Dumo. I believe in you." Just then, a soft knock at the door interrupted their moment. Dumo turned to see one of the royal messengers enter the room, his face grim. "My prince, my lady," the messenger said, bowing low. "There is urgent news. The rival kingdoms of Iboha and Jaba are gathering at the borders of Ekara. It seems they've allied, and they are preparing to strike with all their might." Dumo's heart sank. "How long until they arrive?" "Within 2 days, my lord," the messenger replied. "They are coming in full force. We must act quickly." Nia stood up, her eyes sharp with determination. "Then we will prepare. But we must also find a way to understand the prophecy. If our child is truly the key to the future, we need to ensure they are protected, that the prophecy is not twisted against us." Dumo nodded, feeling the urgency pressing down on him. "We must strengthen our defenses. I'll gather the generals and the leaders of Ekara. But we'll also send scouts to search for any clues about the prophecy. If there's someone out there who knows its true meaning, we will find them." The messenger bowed once more and left the room, leaving Dumo and Nia alone once again. The air between them was thick with the gravity of their situation. Ekara's survival was at stake, but so was the future of the land and sea. "Tomorrow, we search for answers," Dumo said quietly. "We don't have much time." The following morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Dumo and Nia set out on a journey of their own. They could not wait for the rival kingdoms to strike. They needed to understand the prophecy, to learn what the future held, and to ensure that the child Nia carried would bring the promise of unity and peace, not destruction. They left the palace with a small group of trusted warriors, traveling far into the forests of Ekara. The ancient forests were known for their mystical qualities, and there were rumors that a wise elder, known only as the Seeker, lived deep within them. The Seeker was said to be a keeper of knowledge, someone who understood the ancient prophecies and the old magic of the land. The journey was long and difficult. The further they traveled into the forest, the more the air seemed to hum with ancient energy. The trees towered above them, their leaves whispering secrets in the wind. Dumo could feel something stirring deep within the earth, a connection to the past that seemed to grow stronger with each step they took. Finally, after days of traveling, they reached the heart of the forest, a sacred clearing where the Seeker was said to reside. In the center of the clearing stood a stone circle, ancient runes carved into the stones. The ground around the circle was overgrown with moss, but the air felt charged, as though the very earth was alive with magic. As they approached the stone circle, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, elderly woman with flowing white hair and piercing eyes. She was dressed in simple robes, but there was an air of wisdom about her, a presence that seemed to fill the clearing. "I have been waiting for you, Prince Dumo, Nia, the Seeker said, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable strength. You have come seeking answers. Dumo bowed respectfully. We have. We seek to understand the prophecy, to protect our child and fulfill its true purpose. We need your guidance. The Seeker nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied them both. The prophecy you seek is not simple. It is both a blessing and a curse. It is the key to both creation and destruction. You must tread carefully, for not all truths are easy to bear. Nia stepped forward, her heart racing. Please, we need to know what will happen. What must we do to ensure our child's future, to unite the land and sea? The Seeker's gaze softened, and she gestured for them to sit. I will tell you what I know, but be prepared. The path ahead will not be easy, and you may not like all that you learn. Dumo and Nia exchanged a glance, then sat on the moss-covered ground, ready to hear the truth. The Seeker motioned for Dumo and Nia to sit before her, her ancient eyes still filled with a deep knowing. The air around them seemed to still, the once distant sounds of birds and rustling leaves falling silent as if nature itself was listening. The Seeker's gaze rested on them both, then turned toward the stone circle behind her. Her voice was low, but clear, and carried the weight of ancient wisdom. Your journey, Prince Dumo, Nia, is not one of choice, but of destiny. The prophecy you speak of was not written in any one book, nor was it passed down in the traditional ways of the kingdom. It is older than your people, older than the kingdoms themselves. It is older than the land and the sea. Dumo's brow furrowed. Older than the land and sea. But how is that possible? The kingdoms of Ekara and Umma have existed for centuries. The prophecy is part of our history. The Seeker nodded slowly. The kingdoms you know are young compared to the great cycle of the world. Long before Ekara or Umma were born, there were other lands, other peoples, and other gods. The prophecy you seek was created at a time when the gods themselves walked the earth, when the ocean and the land were not separate but intertwined in harmony. Nia leaned in, her voice trembling slightly. You mean, the prophecy wasn't just for Ekara and Umma? It's for all the lands. Yes, the Seeker replied. And no. It is for all lands that will one day be, and yet, it is also specific to the kingdoms you know. The prophecy is a bridge, a link between what was, what is, and what could be. It is tied to your child, Dumo, and Nia. The union between land and sea, the merging of two worlds so different yet intertwined, was always meant to happen. Your child, born from both worlds, will unlock what is hidden, both the destruction and the salvation of the earth and sea. Dumo's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to understand. You said destruction and salvation. Which is true? The Seeker sighed, her eyes deep with sorrow. Both. The prophecy speaks of a time when the land and sea will clash, when the natural balance between them will be broken. This was always the fate of the earth. For too long, the waters have been separated from the land, and the people of the land have forgotten the importance of the sea. This separation has led to suffering on both sides. The child you carry, Nia, will heal this rift, but only if they are allowed to fulfill their purpose. But if they fulfill their purpose, how will that bring destruction? Nia asked, her voice shaking with fear. The Seeker's eyes grew darker as she spoke. The child you carry is powerful beyond comprehension. When born, they will be both of the land and the sea, an ancient power that has not existed for centuries. However, there are those who will fear this power. There are those who will seek to use it for their own purposes. This child, your child, will be the key to a war that could either unite or destroy both worlds. The prophecy cannot be ignored. Your child will be hunted by those who fear what they do not understand, and they will be manipulated by those who seek to use their power for control. Dumo felt a chill run through him. So, our child will be seen as a weapon. The Seeker nodded gravely. Yes, but not just a weapon, also a symbol. The unification of the land and sea is something that has not been achieved since the dawn of time. To some, this child will be the answer to their prayers, the hope for a new world. To others, they will be a threat, the harbinger of destruction. The forces that seek to control the child will stop at nothing to ensure that the prophecy is fulfilled in their own way. Nia closed her eyes, the weight of the truth settling on her shoulders. How can we protect our child? How can we make sure that they bring peace, not destruction? The seeker paused, her gaze piercing. You cannot do it alone. The child will need allies. Those who understand the balance between the land and the sea, those who know the old ways. You must seek them out. The first step is understanding the deep magic that binds both worlds, magic older than your kingdoms, older than the gods themselves. And then, you must face the forces that would see your child destroyed. Dumo clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. We'll do whatever it takes to protect our child. We won't let anyone twist the prophecy for their own gain. The seeker gave a rare smile, though it was tinged with sadness. I know you will. But remember, the journey ahead will not be easy. You must face those who are already hunting you, those who are already plotting against you. The rival kingdoms are only the beginning. There are forces beyond your kingdom's borders that are far more powerful. And they will stop at nothing to prevent the prophecy from being fulfilled. The words of the seeker weighed heavily on Dumo and Nia as they left the sacred clearing. The seeker's warning echoed in their minds. Dark forces were already plotting, and they would need to find allies if they were to have any hope of protecting their child and fulfilling the prophecy. As they returned to the palace, Dumo's mind raced. He knew that time was running out. The rival kingdoms of Iboha and Njaba were already gathering their forces, preparing for war. The prophecy, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a ticking clock. Every moment that passed brought them closer to the moment when their child would be born, and with it, the possibility of both salvation and destruction. Where do we go from here? Nia asked softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. We need to find those who can help us, Dumo replied, his voice filled with determination. The seeker mentioned magic older than the kingdoms. There must be others out there who understand this magic. We must find them before the rival kingdoms do. Nia nodded. We'll need to travel farther. To places where the old magic still lives, places where people remember the ancient ways. We can't do this alone. Dumo agreed. We'll need to cross the seas, travel into the deep jungles, and maybe even seek guidance from the elders of the mountains. There are hidden powers in this world, Nia. The key to saving our child, and the future of Ekra and Umo, may lie in those very places. Together, they made plans to depart immediately. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but their love for each other, and their shared belief in the prophecy, gave them the strength they needed to continue their quest. As they gathered their belongings, a sense of urgency filled the air. The rival kingdoms of Iboha and Njaba were not their only concern. The shadowy forces that sought to control the prophecy, to control their child, were already on the move. And time was running out. The winds of change blew cold as Dumo and Nia prepared to leave the familiar walls of Ekra's royal palace behind. With the knowledge imparted by the seeker, the weight of their task now felt like a storm, pressing down on them. Every moment counted. Their child's birth was approaching, and with it, the fate of two worlds. But how could they protect their child from the growing darkness? How could they ensure the prophecy was fulfilled, and not twisted into something disastrous? Their first destination was to the coast. There, they would seek the guidance of the Elder of the Tides, an ancient figure who had lived on the fringes of Ekra's coastal villages for as long as anyone could remember. She was said to be a keeper of the sea's deepest secrets, one who could speak to the water itself. If anyone understood the balance between land and sea, it was her. Dumo and Nia set out with a small band of warriors who had sworn loyalty to them, moving swiftly through the bustling streets of Ekra. The royal city, once lively with celebration and peace, now felt tense, the air thick with anticipation. It wasn't just the approaching war that made the city feel uneasy, it was the unknowns of the prophecy, the whispers of enemies in every shadow, and the pressure of ensuring that the future could be safeguarded. The journey to the coast was long and arduous. They traveled through thick forests, over rolling hills, and across vast plains. Every night they camped beneath the stars, sharing stories of their people, of the histories of Ekra, and of the magic that bound the world. Nia, with her connection to the sea, would often pause to listen to the distant sounds of the waves as if drawing strength from them. Dumo, ever the protector, would survey their surroundings, ever watchful of danger. After several days, they arrived at the coast, the salt of the sea air filling their lungs as they approached a small village nestled between the cliffs and the shore. The sea was calm here, its waves gentle, though Dummo could feel an undercurrent of something deeper, something older, beneath the surface. In the heart of the village, an old woman awaited them. She had silver hair, braided with seaweed and shells, and her skin was weathered by time, her eyes as blue as the deep ocean. She stood tall, her presence commanding yet calming, and when she saw Dummo and Nia, a knowing smile spread across her face. "Welcome, Prince Dummo," Nia, the elder of the tides, greeted them. Her voice was low, like the distant rumble of thunder. "I've been expecting you." "How did you know we were coming?" Dummo asked, surprised. "I've seen the waves, felt the shifts in the currents," the elder replied. "The sea speaks to those who listen closely. It has been whispering of your journey for some time." Dummo and Nia exchanged a glance, their hearts both lightened and burdened by the elder's words. She stepped forward and motioned for them to sit by a small fire that had been lit in the center of the village. The villagers, a quiet and humble people, gave them space, though their eyes watched them with curiosity and reverence. "You seek knowledge of the prophecy," the elder said once they were seated. "The sea has told me of it. The child you carry, Nia, is not simply a child of prophecy. They are the key to the balance that the world has lost. The land and sea are two halves of the same whole, and your child is the one destined to reunite them." Nia's heart raced. "But the prophecy also speaks of destruction. How can the child bring both salvation and ruin?" The elder's expression grew solemn. "The prophecy was never meant to be fully understood, not by mere mortals. It is a force beyond even the gods. But it is true that when your child is born, both worlds will be tested. The land, which has been fractured by its own greed, and the sea, which has been kept in shadows, will clash. The child is the mediator, the one who will either bring harmony or destruction, depending on the hearts of those who seek to control them." Dummo clenched his fists. "So, we're not just fighting other kingdoms. We're fighting the very forces of nature itself." "Not just the forces of nature," the elder replied, her voice tinged with sorrow. "There are ancient beings, spirits of the land and the sea, that once governed the balance. But they have long since withdrawn from the mortal world, leaving the kingdoms to fight amongst themselves. Now, they stir once more, sensing that the time of reawakening is near." Dummo sat back, his mind racing. Spirits of the land and sea. Were they watching them? Were they the true force behind the conflict that had already begun to tear at Ekara's seams? "Where can we find these spirits?" Nia asked, her voice a mix of determination and uncertainty. "They are not so easily found," the elder said, her eyes darkening. "They dwell in places where the land and sea meet in perfect harmony. The caves beneath the sacred mountain of Eba, the hidden grottos beneath the waves near the island of Zama, the ancient forests where the trees sing songs of old. You will need to find these places and earn their favor. But be warned, some spirits will seek to guide you, and others will try to destroy you. The balance must be restored, but only if the child can survive long enough to make the choice." The elder's warning about the spirits left an unsettling feeling in Dummo and Nia's hearts. Their journey was not just one of finding allies or protecting their child, it was now a quest for something much greater, something that tied the very essence of land and sea together. "The path ahead is fraught with danger," the elder said, her voice soft but firm. "You must trust in each other, in the love you share, and in the power of the child you carry. But be careful. You are not the only one seeking the spirit's favor. There are those who would use them for their own purposes." Nia nodded, her resolve hardening. "We will find the balance. We will make sure the prophecy is fulfilled as it was meant to be." "Then you must leave at once," the elder said. "The spirits have already begun to stir, and the rival kingdoms are not the only ones searching for you. Time is of the essence." With a final, knowing look from the elder, Dummo and Nia boarded a small boat, their warriors ready to set sail to the island of Zama, the first place where they might seek the ancient spirits of the sea. The winds were strong, pushing them toward their destiny, but even as they sailed farther from Ekara, Dummo felt the weight of the prophecy on his shoulders. The sea, once calm and peaceful, now seemed to stir with a strange energy, as if something deep within its depths was calling to them. The journey was just beginning. The path ahead would lead them to the heart of the storm, and they would either emerge victorious or be lost to the tides forever. The boat rocked gently against the rising waves as Dumo and Nia sat side by side, their eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow across the water, and for a brief moment, the world seemed peaceful. Yet, in the air hung a thick tension, an undercurrent of something hidden just below the surface. Dumo could feel it in the salty breeze, Nia could hear it in the distant calls of the seabirds. They were headed into the unknown, toward an island that was said to hold the answers to their questions, and perhaps the key to their survival. The island of Zama was a place of legends, a place where the sea and the land met in harmony. It was said that only those with a pure heart could reach it, that its hidden grottos were sacred and protected by powerful spirits. But no one had set foot on the island in generations, not since the Great Split, when the kingdom of Ekra had severed its ties with the sea. Now, only whispers and rumors remained, stories passed down by the elders that spoke of strange lights beneath the waves and the ghostly songs of ancient beings. As they approached the island, the air grew colder, and the wind picked up speed, whipping around them with greater force. The boat surged forward, propelled by an invisible hand. Dumo tightened his grip on the boat's edge, his eyes scanning the water around them. Something was out there, something that could sense their arrival. "Hold on," he shouted to Nia, though she was already steady, her sharp senses attuned to the changes in the air and water. Her deep connection to the sea gave her an advantage, and even now, she could feel the presence of something ancient stirring beneath the waves. "We're close," Nia whispered, her voice low but full of conviction. The boat crested a final wave, and before them, the island of Zama rose from the sea like a dark silhouette, covered in thick jungle and towering trees that seemed to stretch impossibly high. The island was surrounded by cliffs on all sides, jagged rocks that jutted out of the water, and hidden coves that no ship dared to approach. But within the heart of the island, they could see the faint outline of a cave entrance, a natural arch carved into the cliffs. This was the path they had been seeking. As they neared the shore, the sea grew choppy, and the air thickened with a strange energy. Dumo felt his chest tighten as if the very earth was holding its breath. He glanced at Nia, her expression serious, and he knew that whatever lay ahead, it would not be easy. "We're not alone," Dumo murmured, scanning the horizon again. "I can feel it. Something's watching us." Nia nodded, her eyes narrowing. "The spirits are not always friendly. We must approach with caution." The boat scraped against the rocky shore, and they disembarked, stepping onto the uneven ground of the island. The jungle before them was dense, the air thick with the scent of moss and salt water. Strange sounds echoed from within, a chorus of calls and whispers that seemed to come from the very trees themselves. Dumo's hand instinctively reached for his sword, though he knew that this journey was not one that could be fought with steel alone. "Stay close," Dumo warned, leading the way into the jungle. The dense foliage parted before them, almost as if it was guiding them forward. The deeper they walked into the jungle, the more the sense of something ancient, something powerful, seemed to grow. The very ground beneath their feet felt alive, as if it was aware of their presence. It was clear now that they were not merely walking through a jungle, they were entering a place of great magic, a place where the natural and supernatural realms intertwined. After a long and silent walk, they arrived at the cave entrance. The massive rock arch stood like a guardian, its surface covered in strange carvings, symbols that seemed to shift and change as they gazed upon them. Dumo stepped forward, his hand hovering over the symbols. They were not words, not in any language he knew, but they radiated with power. These were ancient symbols, the language of the spirits. "The entrance is protected by powerful magic," Nia murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to prove ourselves worthy to enter." Dumo nodded. "We will do whatever it takes." Nia stepped forward, her eyes closed as she reached out to the energy around them. For a moment, she seemed to blend into the environment, becoming one with the jungle, the sea, and the earth. Her body shimmered, her skin glowing with the light of the sea, and her long hair rippled like waves in the breeze. Then, as though responding to an unspoken command, the symbols on the cave entrance began to glow. A voice, ancient and deep, echoed from within the cave. It was not spoken in words but in feelings, in impressions. The voice filled their minds, bringing a sense of calm, of ancient wisdom. "Why do you seek the spirits?" the voice asked. "We seek the balance between land and sea," Nia replied, her voice steady. "We seek to protect the child we carry, for they are the key to the prophecy, a prophecy that can either save or destroy both our worlds." "The child is both a gift and a curse," the voice intoned, the words heavy with meaning. "Only the pure of heart may walk the path of the child. Only those who understand both the darkness and the light can shape the future." Dummo felt his pulse quicken as the voice continued, but his determination did not waver. He knew they had no choice but to press on. "We will not fail," he said firmly. "We will protect our child, no matter the cost." There was a long pause, and then the voice spoke again, this time softer, almost approving. "Then you may enter. But beware. The path is not one of certainty. Many have walked it before you, and many have fallen. The future is always shifting, always changing. You must decide what your hearts truly desire." With that, the symbols on the cave entrance flared brightly, and the massive rock arch slowly parted, revealing the dark passage beyond. The air that poured from within the cave was cool and damp, but it held a strange pull, drawing them in. Dummo and Nia shared one last glance before stepping into the cave, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Inside, the unknown awaited them. They would either find the answers they sought or become lost in the labyrinth of the spirit's tests. And in their hearts, they both knew that the fate of the child, of the land and sea, rested on the choices they would make within these sacred walls. The path inside the cave was narrow, winding deep into the belly of the island. As they walked, the air grew colder, and the faint glow of their surroundings became darker, replaced by the glow of the symbols on the walls. Strange shadows danced along the cave's interior, and the quiet whispers that had filled the air outside now grew louder, as if the very walls of the cave were alive with ancient voices. Dummo and Nia moved forward cautiously, every step echoing through the cavernous space. They could feel the weight of the spirit's presence pressing against them, as if the very air was charged with energy. Suddenly, a voice rang out, not in their minds this time, but in the space around them. It was a voice filled with ancient authority, commanding and powerful. "Who dares to enter the sacred cave of the spirits?" Dummo stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with reverence. "I am Prince Dummo of Ekara, and this is Nia, the mother of the child of prophecy. We seek guidance, for the future of our people, of the land and the sea, is at stake." The voice echoed again, deep and rumbling. "You seek to protect the child, but do you truly understand the burden of that responsibility? Do you understand the cost of fulfilling the prophecy?" Nia's heart pounded in her chest. She stepped forward, her voice soft but filled with strength. "We understand that the prophecy will bring both light and darkness. We are willing to bear that burden. But we need the guidance of the spirits to ensure that we fulfill the prophecy as it was meant to be, without letting it fall into the wrong hands." The voice was silent for a long moment, and then it spoke once more, this time with a hint of amusement. "Very well. If you are truly worthy, you must prove it. You must face the trials of the spirits. Only then will you be granted the knowledge you seek." Dummo and Nia exchanged a glance, their hearts heavy with the realization that the path ahead would not be easy. The trials of the spirits were legendary, few had survived them, and even fewer had emerged with their minds and hearts intact. But they had no choice. They had to face the trials. Their child's future, and the future of both the land and sea, depended on it. The cave seemed to stretch on endlessly, its walls adorned with strange symbols that pulsed in time with Dummo and Nia's heartbeat. Every step they took was met with the quiet echo of their own footsteps, but around them, the air hummed with the presence of ancient forces. It was as though the very earth beneath their feet was watching them, listening to their thoughts. As they moved deeper into the cave, the temperature dropped further. A cold mist began to form around them, swirling like smoke, and the shadows seemed to grow longer and more alive. Dummo could feel an oppressive weight bearing down on him, and he knew that they were being tested already, even if the trials had yet to begin. The voice they had heard earlier, deep, ancient, and commanding, sounded again, this time from every direction at once, reverberating through the walls of the cave. It was as if the very stone was speaking to them, guiding them, or perhaps pushing them forward, testing their resolve. The first trial begins now, the voice boomed, and it is a trial of the mind. You will face visions of the past, present, and future. Only those who can see clearly, who can separate illusion from truth, will succeed. Dumo and Nia looked at each other. They had heard stories of such trials, visions that could drive even the strongest warriors mad, tests that twisted the mind and soul. But they were not afraid. They had faced too many battles together, had been through too much, to let something as intangible as a vision break them. The mist thickened around them, blurring their vision, and the shadows of the cave seemed to stretch and writhe. Suddenly, the world around them shifted. The ground beneath their feet disappeared, and they found themselves standing on the edge of a vast, rolling sea. The wind howled through the air, and the waves crashed violently against a rocky shore. The sky above them was dark, filled with swirling clouds and flashes of lightning. Dumo's heart raced as he realized that the scene was not real, it was a vision, a test of his perception. But the vision was so vivid, so lifelike, that it was hard to tell where the illusion ended and reality began. "Nia," he shouted over the roar of the wind, his voice barely carrying over the storm. "Stay close." Nia nodded, her eyes locked on him. "I'm here, Dumo." Suddenly, a figure appeared in the distance, a tall man cloaked in black, standing alone on the shore. Dumo could feel an immediate sense of danger radiating from him. His instincts screamed that this was no ordinary person. The figure turned toward them, and Dumo's blood ran cold as he saw the face beneath the hood. It was a face he knew well, his own. "Dumo." Nia gasped, stepping back in shock. "Is that you?" It was impossible. The figure before them looked exactly like Dumo, down to the smallest detail, the same dark eyes, the same strong jaw, the same noble features. But there was something different about him. A darkness in his gaze, a malevolence that Dumo had never known. The vision of himself raised a hand, and the sky above them crackled with dark energy. The sea surged, and waves rose higher, crashing with increasing fury. "Do you see it now?" the dark Dumo asked, his voice a distorted echo of Dumo's own. "This is the path you are walking. The choices you make will lead to destruction, to war. You cannot save both the land and the sea. The child you carry will be the death of you all." Dumo's heart clenched, but he stood tall, his voice steady. "This is not real. This is a lie." The dark Dumo smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only coldness and hatred. "Is it a lie? You cannot escape your fate. You cannot outrun the darkness that follows you. The prophecy is doomed from the start. You cannot save the child, and you cannot save yourself." Dumo's eyes burned with anger, but he knew that this was not the time for rage. This was a test, a trial to see if he could maintain his clarity. He had to trust his instincts, to trust in the love he and Nia shared. They were stronger than this illusion. He turned to Nia, his eyes locked with hers. "This vision is not the truth," he said firmly. "We will not let fear dictate our future. We will face whatever comes together." Nia nodded, her eyes filled with the same determination. She reached out to him, and together, they faced the dark vision. "Disappear," Dumo shouted, raising his hand. "You are nothing more than a shadow." With a mighty roar, the dark figure vanished into the storm, and the sea calmed. The winds died down, and the sky cleared, returning to the calm, peaceful scene that had been there before. The trial had ended. The voice of the spirits echoed once more, sounding amused, yet approving. "You have passed the first trial. But be warned, the path ahead will not be easy. The trials are not over, and the next one will test your very souls." Dumo and Nia took a moment to catch their breath. The weight of the vision lingered in their minds, but they knew they had passed the first test. They had stood firm in the face of fear and doubt, and they had emerged victorious. The cave around them began to shift again, the walls narrowing and twisting as though the very stone was alive. The light dimmed, and the air grew thick with the scent of earth and water. "This next trial," Nia said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet dread, "will be one of the heart, won't it?" Dumo nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Yes. The trials of the spirit. As they walked deeper into the cave, the air seemed to grow even heavier, as though they were being drawn toward something ancient, something powerful. The very earth beneath their feet pulsed with energy, and Dumo could feel it. This was a place of great power, a place where the spirits of the land and sea had once communed. Ahead of them, a soft light began to glow from within the darkness, and they stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. The soft light ahead of them grew brighter as they walked, casting long shadows on the walls of the cave. It felt as though the cave itself was alive, shifting and breathing with every step they took. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence heavy with the weight of their journey. As they reached the source of the light, they saw before them a large chamber, its walls adorned with intricate carvings of ancient symbols. At the center of the chamber was a pool of water, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the faint glow that filled the room. But it wasn't the beauty of the scene that caught Dumo's attention. It was the figure standing beside the pool. A woman, cloaked in white, her face hidden beneath a veil. She stood tall, her posture regal, yet there was an air of sorrow around her. "You have come," the woman said, her voice soft, almost mournful. Dumo and Nia stepped forward, their hearts racing. "Who are you?" Dumo asked, his voice tense with curiosity and caution. The woman slowly raised her veil, revealing a face that was both familiar and strange. She had the same dark eyes as Nia, the same features, yet there was something ethereal about her, something that marked her as more than human. "I am the spirit of the sea," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "And I am the one who will test your heart." Nia stepped forward, her voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" The spirit's gaze softened, and she extended her hand toward the pool. "The trial of the heart is one of sacrifice," she said, her voice quiet yet heavy with meaning. "You must choose between your love for each other and the future of your child. Only by making the ultimate sacrifice will you prove your worth." Dumo and Nia exchanged a look, their hearts heavy with the weight of the decision that lay before them. The spirit's words hung in the air, echoing in their minds. Sacrifice. What did that mean? The air in the chamber felt thick, almost suffocating, as Dumo and Nia stood in front of the spirit of the sea. The words she spoke reverberated through the space, hanging heavily in their hearts. "You must choose between your love for each other and the future of your child," the spirit had said. "Only by making the ultimate sacrifice will you prove your worth." Dumo felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted, as though the world itself was testing him. He had always believed in the strength of love, the bond that tied him to Nia, to the child they were carrying. But now, the very nature of that bond was being challenged. Could they love so deeply that they would willingly sacrifice one for the other? Would it be enough to secure the future of the land and the sea? Nia's gaze met Dumo's, her eyes wide with uncertainty, her hands trembling. "What does she mean by sacrifice?" Nia whispered, as though afraid to voice the question aloud. Dumo took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. He had known that the trials would not be easy, but he had never imagined they would force him to confront the very heart of his being, to question his deepest convictions. He turned to the spirit. "What kind of sacrifice are you asking for?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him. "Do you want us to give up our love? Our child?" The spirit of the sea remained silent for a moment, her expression unreadable behind her veil. Then, her voice came again, soft but firm. "The sacrifice is not what you think," she said. "It is not a matter of giving up what you hold dear. It is a matter of making the hardest choice, the one that no heart would wish to face." Dumo's heart clenched as he tried to understand. What could possibly be harder than choosing between his love for Nia and their unborn child? He couldn't imagine a world where he had to choose between the two. They were both his everything. The spirit's gaze softened as though reading his thoughts, understanding his struggle. "The future of your people is tied to the child you carry, Prince Dumo. But the child's path is one of great danger. The prophecy speaks of both light and darkness. The child will be the one to unite the land and the sea, but only if the blood of sacrifice is shed. The choice is not about choosing one life over another. It is about choosing the future, the fate of your kingdom, over your own desires." Nia's voice trembled as she spoke, barely above a whisper. Are you asking one of us to die? The spirit of the sea gave a slow, sorrowful nod. To protect the prophecy, to protect the future, one must make a sacrifice that will ensure the child's safety and the balance between land and sea. The one who remains will carry the weight of the world, but will also safeguard the child's legacy. Dummo felt a wave of grief wash over him. His mind raced with the impossibility of the choice. He couldn't imagine a world without Nia by his side. And yet, the fate of their kingdom, and the unborn child, depended on the sacrifice. He could feel the weight of the decision in his bones. The responsibility. The cost. Nia stepped forward, her voice steady now, though there was a faint tremor in it. "Dummo," she said softly, her gaze meeting his. "I know what this means. I know what we must do." Dummo looked at her, his heart aching. "No, Nia. We can't." She placed a gentle finger to his lips, silencing him. "We can, Dummo. We must. You have always fought for the kingdom. You have always protected your people. This is no different. I will make the sacrifice." Dummo's chest tightened with anguish. He reached out to grasp her hands, his voice cracking. "I cannot live without you, Nia. You are the light in my life. The strength I have comes from you." Nia smiled sadly, her eyes filled with both love and determination. "And you, Dummo, are my heart. But if I die, I will not truly be gone. I will live on in the legacy of our child. And the sea will always be with you, in every wave and every breath of the wind. I will never truly leave you." The spirit's voice interrupted, softer now, filled with the sorrow of ages. "The choice must be made now. There is no turning back." Dummo closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on him. He had always known that he was born for something greater than himself, that his role as prince was not just about ruling but about sacrificing for the good of his people. But he had never imagined that the price would be so high. He could feel the tears welling up in his eyes, but he held them back, refusing to let them fall. He had to be strong. For Nia. For their child. For the future. He turned to the spirit. "We accept the trial," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Nia will make the sacrifice, but we will ensure the prophecy is fulfilled. The future of our kingdom depends on it." Nia looked at Dummo, her eyes filled with love and sadness. "It's the only way, Dummo. The child will be our legacy. The world will remember us, our sacrifice." With a final, heart-wrenching embrace, Nia stepped toward the pool of water. The light around them began to glow brighter, and the air seemed to shimmer with the power of the sea itself. The spirit of the sea raised her hand, and the water began to swirl, rising up in a powerful vortex. Dummo watched in silence, his heart breaking as Nia slowly sank into the water. The light around her grew blinding, and for a moment, he couldn't see her at all. The vortex calmed, and when the water stilled, Nia was gone. The chamber was silent, save for the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. Dummo stood frozen, the weight of the sacrifice crushing him. He had lost Nia, but in doing so, he had ensured the future of their child, of their kingdom. But the grief was overwhelming. His love, his heart, gone. And now, he was alone. The spirit of the sea watched him silently, her face unreadable. "The child will carry both your blood and hers," she said softly. "The prophecy is fulfilled. The balance between land and sea is restored. But the path ahead will still be fraught with danger. The future is not set in stone. You must protect the child, Prince Dummo. Protect the legacy." Dummo nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of his responsibility. He had lost everything to save the future, but he would not let that sacrifice be in vain. He would protect the child. He would protect the legacy of Nia. As he turned and walked toward the cave exit, the spirit's voice echoed one last time, filled with the solemnity of the ages. "The future is in your hands now, Prince Dummo. What will you do with it?" Dummo stood at the mouth of the cave, the cool sea breeze brushing against his face. The island's jungle stretched out before him, the shadows long as the sun dipped low in the sky. His heart was heavy with grief, but the weight of the prophecy, the responsibility of the child, remained ever present in his mind. His journey had taken him to places he never imagined, through trials of the mind, the heart, and now, the spirit. He had lost the one person who had been his strength, his love. But he still had a purpose. He still had the child. The legacy. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the sky met the sea. There were still many battles ahead, many dangers yet to be faced. The rival kingdoms, the forces that sought to destroy everything he had worked for, he would not rest until they were defeated. But for now, Dumo made a vow to himself. He would carry Nia's memory with him always. And he would protect their child, no matter the cost. The winds howled around him, but Dumo stood tall. His heart was broken, but his resolve was unshaken. The path ahead was uncertain, but he would walk it, for Nia, for their child, and for the future of the land and sea. And so, with the weight of the world on his shoulders, Prince Dumo took his first step forward into the unknown. The days following Nia's sacrifice were the heaviest of Dumo's life. The kingdom of Ekara mourned, the people unaware of the true reason behind their beloved prince's grief. But Dumo knew that the land and sea were now bound together by more than just the prophecy. There was a deeper, ancient connection that transcended love, life, and death. Still, the weight of the loss lingered, like a cloud that would never lift. The child was now the sole hope of the future. Dumo couldn't afford to let the fragile life within Nia's womb be touched by the darkness that threatened them. But as the sun set each night, Dumo could feel the threat growing stronger. Rumors swirled through the markets and villages of Ekara, whispers of a kingdom to the east, a rival power that sought to claim Ekara for itself. Word had spread that the prophecy of the child, born of the union of land and sea, was more than just a blessing. To the rival kingdom, it was a danger, a force that could threaten their dominance. Dumo had already lost Nia. He could not lose the child. Yet, there was something deeper at play. The rival kingdom, known as Olaria, had been silent for years, but their sudden activity, raids on Ekara's trade routes, mysterious figures seen on the edges of the jungle, and now rumors of an army gathering, could not be ignored. It was clear they were preparing for war. Dumo, now king of Ekara in all but name, stood at the balcony of his father's palace, overlooking the ocean that had once been his kingdom's greatest protector. The sea was calm, its waves gently lapping against the shore. But in Dumo's heart, a storm raged. He knew that the rival kingdom's ambition would soon come crashing like a tidal wave. From the shadows of the palace courtyard, Dumo was not alone. His most trusted advisors and warriors had gathered to discuss the threat. Among them stood Kofi, a tall, broad-shouldered warrior with piercing brown eyes and a stern face. He had been Dumo's closest friend since childhood, the one person who had never wavered in loyalty. "My prince," Kofi spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. "The enemy grows bolder. The news from the north is grim. Olaria has sent spies to our borders. They are preparing to strike." Dumo clenched his fists. "I know," he said quietly. "But what can we do? We have no choice but to face them head-on." Kofi shook his head. "You cannot fight them alone. The people of Ekara are weary from the last war. They are still rebuilding from the damage done to our villages. We need to find allies, Dumo. If we do not unite with other kingdoms, we will fall." Dumo looked out over the horizon, his gaze piercing the distance. "I've thought of that. But who can we trust? The Olarian kingdom is vast and powerful. They have spies in every corner of the known world. How can we know who is loyal?" Kofi stepped closer, his hand resting on Dumo's shoulder. "We must start with those closest to us, your father's allies, the ancient tribes who once held power over the jungles. There are allies among them who still remember their oaths to Ekara. We need their strength." Dumo nodded slowly. "Then we will send word to them. But we must also prepare for war. I won't let Olaria take this kingdom without a fight." As Kofi turned to gather the other warriors, Dumo's thoughts drifted back to Nia. She had given everything to protect the legacy, to protect their unborn child. And now it was his duty to honor that sacrifice. But the child was not yet born, and the prophecy still held sway over their fates. The child was the key to the survival of Ekara, and the key to uniting the land and sea. It was the future that Dumo had to protect, no matter the cost. Dumo's journey took him to the heart of Ekara's jungles, the home of the ancient tribes that had long lived in harmony with the land. These tribes had once ruled the forests, using their deep knowledge of nature and magic to protect the kingdom. Their leaders were wise and powerful, though they had grown more isolated over the years, distancing themselves from the royal family after a long history of conflict. As Dumo and Kofi traveled through the dense foliage, the sounds of the jungle grew louder, the call of birds, the rustle of leaves, the hum of insects filling the air. The further they went, the more ancient the jungle seemed, as if the trees themselves had seen centuries of history pass by. Finally, they arrived at the heart of the jungle, where a massive tree stood, a sacred tree, its roots deep and sprawling like veins through the earth. This was the home of the elders, the spiritual leaders of the jungle tribes. The tribe's leader, an elderly woman named Amina, sat beneath the tree, her eyes closed as she communed with the spirits of the land. When Dumo and Kofi approached, she opened her eyes, and for a moment, it was as though the jungle itself had watched them arrive. "Prince Dumo," Amina said, her voice soft yet filled with authority. "The winds have whispered your name. You have come to seek the guidance of the jungle tribes." Dumo kneeled before her, his head bowed in respect. "I have come seeking your strength, Elder Amina. The kingdom of Ekara is in danger, and we need your help. Olaria moves against us. We cannot stand alone." Amina's eyes flickered with concern, but she did not speak immediately. She looked at Kofi, then back at Dumo. Finally, she spoke. "The time has come, then. The prophecy grows clearer with each passing day. We have long awaited this moment when the land and sea must unite. But the question remains, Prince Dumo, will you be able to protect the child? Will you be able to face the darkness that threatens the very foundation of this kingdom?" Dumo clenched his fists. "I will do whatever it takes. But I need your help, Elder. The Olarian forces are vast, and they will not hesitate to strike first." Amina stood, her form majestic against the backdrop of the massive tree. "We have watched the movements of Olaria. They have stirred the waters of the river, sending their spies and gathering their warriors. But we, too, have our spies, whispers in the wind and watchers in the trees. We know they are coming. And we will stand with you, Prince Dumo." Dumo felt a rush of hope. "You will help us?" Amina nodded. "We will. The tribes will rally to your cause. But know this, there is more at stake than just the kingdom. The child, born of the sea and the land, is the key to something greater. Protecting the child is your true test." Kofi stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean? What greater thing is at stake?" Amina's eyes grew distant, as though seeing something far beyond the present. "There are forces beyond Olaria that wish to take the child, not just for the throne, but for something darker. The child will not just unite land and sea, it will have the power to reshape the world. And there are those who will stop at nothing to control that power." Dumo's heart skipped a beat. "You speak of something greater. What do you mean?" Amina's voice dropped to a whisper. "The child will either save the world, or destroy it." As the days passed, Dumo gathered his forces. The tribes, though once fragmented, came together under a single banner, the banner of Ekara. The alliance was fragile, but it was an alliance nonetheless. Together, they would face Olaria's might. Word had come that Olaria's army was already on the move, an invasion force prepared to strike before the child's birth. The time to act was now. Dumo paced the royal palace, his thoughts racing. His men were ready, but he knew that this battle would be unlike any they had fought before. Olaria's forces were well-trained, ruthless, and hungry for conquest. But they had underestimated Ekara's resolve. The fate of the kingdom, and the child, rested on his shoulders. The drums of war echoed across Ekara as the people prepared for the inevitable clash with Olaria. The sound reverberated through every village, every city, every heart that beat for the kingdom. In the distance, Dumo could hear the faint murmur of the jungle, whispers of the ancient spirits who had once protected the land. With Amina's assurance, the tribes rallied behind Dumo's cause. warriors with painted faces, cloaked in the sacred colors of the jungle, gathered at the borders. Archers, hunters, and mystics all came together, bringing their unique skills to the battlefield. But there was more than just an army preparing to fight. There was a sense of unity, a bond forged in blood, in sacrifice, and in the shared promise of protecting the child who would shape their future. The sun was setting as Dumo stood in front of his army, his heart heavy but resolute. His mind, too, was weighed down by the spirit of the prophecy, by the legacy of Nia, and by the child that grew inside her memory. The sea and the land, bound by the sacrifice of love, would soon be tested. But Dumo would not falter. His resolve was as unyielding as the mountains. Kofi, ever faithful, stood beside him, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The Olarian forces are getting closer, Dumo. We need to move before they find us. Dumo turned to face his friend, his eyes full of the burdens of leadership. We will fight, Kofi. We will protect the child. We will protect Ekara. Kofi met his gaze and gave a small nod. We will fight for Ekara, Prince Dumo. For Nia's legacy. For the child. With a final look at the horizon, Dumo gave the order to move. The warriors marched in formation, their footsteps a thunderous roar beneath the canopy of trees. Ekara's army was ready for battle, but their spirits were weighed down with the knowledge of the sacrifice already made. As Dumo walked through the ranks, he could feel the tension in the air thick with the smell of rain and the anticipation of bloodshed. His soldiers were ready, their faces grim but determined. And yet, in the pit of his stomach, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more than just a battle was about to unfold. It had been 3 days since Dumo had given the order for war. The jungles of Ekara, once peaceful and serene, now felt like the battlegrounds of old. The once pristine roads that connected villages were now filled with the hustle of soldiers and the weight of anticipation. Ekara had never been this unified, this focused. But the enemy was coming. Dumo could sense them before he saw them. The Olarian forces, a vast army of well-trained warriors, had crossed the northern border, and they moved swiftly, marching through the forests like a dark cloud. Reports had come in, scouts from Ekara had spotted their movement. It was only a matter of time before they reached the heart of the kingdom. Dumo knew that a battle at the borders would be inevitable. The only question was whether they could hold the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Prince Dumo, Kofi said, his voice sharp with urgency. We must prepare for the worst. Their numbers are far greater than ours. We need to fall back to the mountain pass where the tribes can defend from higher ground. Dumo nodded, his mind racing. The child must be kept safe. We cannot afford to lose. A victory here will ensure that Ekara remains free. As the Olarian army drew closer, Dumo felt a coldness seep into his veins. He had been to many battles in his youth, but this felt different. The weight of the prophecy, the future of his kingdom, and the life of his child rested on the line. This wasn't just another skirmish, it was a fight for the very soul of Ekara. It was early in the morning when the battle began. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, dust, and anticipation. The soldiers of Ekara, though outnumbered, stood firm, their resolve strengthened by the spirits of their ancestors, by the memory of Nia's sacrifice, and by the child who would one day lead them all. Dumo stood at the front of his forces, his sword drawn, his face grim but focused. Kofi stood by his side, as always, his eyes scanning the battlefield for signs of the enemy. Behind them, the jungle tribes had set up barricades and hidden in the dense foliage, waiting for the right moment to strike. The first wave of Olarian soldiers surged forward, massive, heavily armored men with battle-hardened faces. They were led by General Tarak, a ruthless tactician with a reputation for crushing his enemies without mercy. He had studied Ekara's defenses and knew exactly where to strike. The Olarian forces were not just soldiers, they were hunters. They moved like a tidal wave, swallowing everything in their path. But Ekara's warriors stood firm, their weapons gleaming in the sunlight, their hearts beating with the rhythm of their ancestors. Dumo watched as the Olarian forces clashed with his own. The sounds of metal on metal, the cries of warriors, and the thundering of hoofs filled the air. His soldiers fought with ferocity, but there were too many of the enemy. It was clear that the battle would not be won by force alone. Fall back to the mountain pass. Dumo shouted, his voice carrying over the chaos. We cannot win here. We need higher ground. Kofi's voice echoed in his ear. The tribes are ready, Dumo. We must hold them off long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Dumo's heart raced as he sprinted toward the rear, where the tribes were waiting. He fought through the ranks of Illyrian soldiers, his sword cutting through the air, his mind focused on one goal, protecting the child. His soldiers followed behind him, pushing back the enemy with all their strength, retreating slowly but steadily. When Dumo finally reached the mountain pass, he saw the tribe warriors ready to defend their ground. They had set up traps along the path, pitfalls hidden beneath the dry earth, thorny bushes ready to entangle any who ventured too close. It was the jungle's defense, the same defense that had kept Ekra safe for generations. As the Illyrian forces pursued, they fell into the traps one by one. The battle raged on, but now the tide had shifted. The Illyrian soldiers, unable to advance due to the traps and the sheer force of the jungle tribes, were faltering. However, even as the battle seemed to be turning in their favor, Dumo couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The Illyrian forces were relentless, and their battle tactics were too precise, like they had anticipated every move. He turned to Kofi, who had been watching the battle with a keen eye. Do you think they are being controlled by someone else? Dumo asked, a knot forming in his stomach. Kofi's gaze darkened. I think it's more than just a kingdom-seeking war, Dumo. There's something else at play here. Something bigger. Before Dumo could respond, a loud crack echoed across the battlefield. It was the sound of breaking trees. And from the depths of the jungle, emerging like a storm, came an army of shadowy figures. The jungle seemed to come alive, and from the trees and shadows emerged an army that wasn't of flesh and bone. They were shadowy figures, their bodies distorted by dark magic, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The warriors of Ekra recoiled in shock and fear as the shadow army surged forward, cutting through the jungle like a force of nature. Dumo's heart skipped a beat. No, he whispered, recognizing the dark magic that had come to life. The Illyrian forces, who had been struggling in the battle, now seemed to rally behind the shadows. General Tarek, his face twisted with an eerie grin, stood at the front of the shadow army. The child will belong to us, he shouted, his voice carrying over the battlefield. Kofi stepped forward, his sword drawn. We will fight, Dumo. We must protect the child at all costs. Dumo nodded, his mind racing. He had to protect the child. He had to stop Ilaria, and whoever else was pulling the strings. But the true battle was only beginning. The sudden appearance of the shadow army left Ekra's forces stunned. The warriors, who had fought with such unity, now faltered in the face of a supernatural enemy. These shadowy figures moved with eerie precision, their forms twisting and warping, as if the jungle itself had birthed them from the very soil. Their glowing eyes seemed to pierce the hearts of the defenders, filling them with a chilling sense of dread. General Tarek, now standing at the front of the shadow army, raised his hand, and a low, guttural chant reverberated through the air. The ground trembled beneath the soldiers' feet, and the shadows seemed to grow deeper, as if feeding off the fear of the battlefield. Dumo stood frozen, his sword in hand, as the gravity of the situation set in. These were no ordinary soldiers. These were creatures of darkness, summoned by forces far beyond the reach of the Illyrian kingdom. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Who was behind this? Why had they come? Kofi. Dumo shouted, his voice filled with urgency. What is this? Who are they? Kofi's face was pale, his eyes narrowed in suspicion as he observed the shadowy figures. These are not warriors from Ilaria, he said, his voice low and filled with dread. These are the servants of the dark sorcerer. I thought he was just a myth, a story told to scare children, but he's real. The dark sorcerer? Dumo's voice was filled with disbelief. What do you mean? Kofi's eyes were grim as he explained, long ago, before your father's reign, there was a powerful sorcerer who sought to control both the land and the sea. He was banished after his dark magic nearly destroyed the kingdom. But legends say that his soul was never fully destroyed, and that he still lurks in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return. It seems that moment is now. Dumo's heart pounded in his chest. The presence of the dark sorcerer meant more than just a battle for the throne, it meant the very survival of Ekara and its people were in jeopardy. And the child, the one born from the union of land and sea, was at the center of this dark plot. Then we must stop him, Dumo said with determination. We must protect the child at all costs. With the appearance of the Shadow Army, the battlefield had become even more chaotic. The soldiers of Ekara, despite their fear, fought valiantly, but the shadow figures were unlike anything they had encountered. Each strike seemed to pass through them, leaving only a fleeting sensation of cold air. And with each passing moment, the dark magic that surrounded the sorcerers seemed to grow stronger. As the battle raged on, Dumo knew that their forces could not hold much longer. The Shadow Army was too powerful, and the Olarian soldiers were now emboldened, fighting with a ferocity fueled by the dark magic that swirled around them. "We need to retreat," Kofi shouted, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "We can't win this fight on the battlefield. We must protect the heart of Ekara, the temple where the ancient powers of the land are kept. That is where the prophecy will be fulfilled." Dumo nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "The temple," he muttered to himself. The ancient temple hidden deep within the jungle was the spiritual heart of Ekara, where the old magic of the kingdom was said to be concentrated. It was the last place where Ekara's true power could be found, and it was where the child was destined to fulfill the prophecy. The two friends pushed through the battlefield, cutting a path through the chaos to the heart of the jungle. Behind them, the sounds of the battle echoed, but Dumo's focus was fixed on the temple. The child had to be protected, and the only way to do that was to ensure the power of the prophecy could be invoked before it was too late. As they neared the temple, Dumo's heart quickened. The air seemed to shift around them, charged with the ancient energy that flowed through the jungle. The temple loomed ahead, its massive stone doors covered in intricate carvings of mythical creatures and sacred symbols. It was said that only those who truly understood the magic of Ekara could enter, and Dumo, now king in all but name, was about to test that theory. The temple was eerily silent, standing in the midst of the dense jungle like an ancient relic of a bygone age. Vines clung to the stone walls, and the roots of the great trees wrapped around its base, as if the jungle itself were guarding it from the outside world. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient incense, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Dumo and Kofi approached the massive stone door, their steps echoing in the stillness. It was a grand structure, built by ancestors long forgotten, and it held secrets that even the wisest of the kingdom's scholars could only dream of understanding. "Here it is," Kofi said, his voice hushed, as if speaking aloud might disturb the sacredness of the place. "The heart of Ekara." Dumo nodded. "The child must be protected here. We need to activate the magic. But I don't know how. This temple is old, Kofi. The magic that lies within it might have faded over the centuries." "Then we will find a way," Kofi said with determination. "We have no choice." They approached the door, and Dumo placed his hand on the stone. As soon as his fingers touched the cool surface, the carvings on the door seemed to glow faintly, the ancient symbols shifting in a way that seemed almost alive. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed from within the stone, filling the air with a sense of ancient power. "Who seeks entry into the heart of Ekara?" it demanded. Dumo stood tall and spoke with unwavering resolve. "I am Dumo, Prince of Ekara, son of the sea and the land. I seek protection for the child who is the key to the prophecy. Open the door, that we may fulfill our destiny." For a long moment, there was silence, the only sound the wind whispering through the trees. Then, the stone began to rumble and shift. Slowly, the massive doors creaked open, revealing the dark, shadowed interior of the temple. Inside, faint blue light shimmered in the air, casting strange, flickering shadows on the walls. Dumo stepped forward, his heart pounding. "We must move quickly. The Shadow Army will not give up so easily." Kofi followed closely behind. "We are not alone, Dumo. This place is filled with magic. Let it guide us." As they entered the temple, the door closed behind them with a deafening sound, sealing them inside. The light from within grew brighter, revealing a vast chamber filled with towering stone pillars, each one etched with the history of Ekara's ancient kings and queens. At the far end of the chamber stood a great altar, bathed in a soft, ethereal light. And there, on the altar, lay a crystal, shining with a soft blue light. Dumo felt an overwhelming sense of awe as he approached it. The prophecy, the magic of the land and sea, was bound within this crystal. The key to the future of Ekara, and to the safety of the child, lay within his grasp. Dumo reached out and touched the crystal. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy rushed through his body, flooding him with visions of a kingdom united, of peace between the land and the sea. But then, darker visions appeared, visions of a shadow rising, of the child being consumed by the darkness that threatened to destroy all. The crystal pulsed in his hand, and a voice echoed in his mind. The child's destiny is not just to unite the land and sea, but to fight the darkness that seeks to swallow the world whole. Only through sacrifice will the prophecy be fulfilled. Dumo's heart skipped a beat as the voice faded, leaving him breathless with the weight of its meaning. He had always known the prophecy was important, but he had never fully understood its true cost. The child, his child, was not just a symbol of hope. The child would be the one to face the darkness. And to protect the kingdom, to protect the world, there would be a price. But what would that price be? Would it be the child's life? Would it be his own? The crystal in Dumo's hand pulsed again, its light brighter than before. The vision it had shared with him still lingered in his mind, like a shadow of uncertainty. The child, his child, was not simply the key to Ekara's future. The prophecy had hinted at a sacrifice, a price that would shape the destiny of both land and sea. What kind of sacrifice could be demanded for the salvation of a kingdom? Dumo felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. He was not only fighting to protect his people, but also to preserve the delicate balance between the land and the sea, the balance that his union with Nia had promised. It was a balance that had been tested and threatened by forces beyond their control. Forces that were now bearing down on them with unrelenting fury. You saw it too, didn't you? Kofi's voice cut through the heavy silence, breaking Dumo's reverie. Dumo turned, his hand still resting on the glowing crystal. Yes, he whispered. The child is more than a symbol. The prophecy is true, only through sacrifice can the darkness be vanquished. His words came out hollow, as though the very thought of what might come was too much to bear. Kofi's expression softened, his usual fierce demeanor replaced by a somber look. What sacrifice, Dumo? What is it that you must give to fulfill the prophecy? Dumo felt the answer deep within him, an understanding that had come with the crystal's vision. It was as though the temple itself was speaking to him, its ancient magic flowing through his veins. But he did not want to voice what he already knew. The child is the key, Kofi. But to ensure that the darkness is defeated, to ensure the prophecy's fulfillment, there will be a cost. A life must be given. Kofi shook his head in disbelief. No, Dumo. It cannot be. You cannot lose the child, or worse, yourself. Dumo turned to his friend, his eyes filled with the same pain and fear. It's the only way, Kofi. The darkness that follows us is not merely the Olarian kingdom, it is something much older, much more powerful. The dark sorcerer is only a puppet, a vessel for a force that threatens not just Ekara, but all of creation. The child is the only one who can stop it, but at a great cost. The weight of Dumo's words hung in the air, the reality of their situation settling in like a suffocating fog. No one, not even the strongest warriors or the most ancient of spirits, could escape the truth of the prophecy. There was no running from it, no bargaining, no trickery that could change the outcome. If they wanted to save Ekara, the land and sea would have to pay the price. Outside the temple, the battle raged on. The Olarian soldiers, under the dark influence of the sorcerer's magic, continued their relentless assault on Ekara's forces. The Shadow Army, a swirling mass of eerie, magical warriors, pushed forward with an unnatural strength, each strike from their ethereal weapons more deadly than the last. The forces of Ekara, though they fought valiantly, were being pushed back, their ranks thinning as the day wore on. Dumo knew that time was running out. Every moment that passed, more lives were lost. The people of Ekra were falling, and the child, the key to saving them all, was still vulnerable. The prophecy had not been fully revealed, but Dumo knew what needed to be done. It had always been this way. "Dumo, we must make a choice," Kofi said, pulling him from his thoughts. "The shadow army grows stronger. They will be upon us soon. If we do nothing, Ekra will fall." "I know," Dumo answered softly, his eyes not leaving the crystal. It continued to glow, filling the chamber with its unearthly light. "But the price? I cannot bear it. How can I ask anyone to make such a sacrifice?" Kofi stepped closer, his hand resting on Dumo's shoulder. "You don't have to ask anyone, Dumo. The choice is yours. But you are not alone in this. Whatever happens, we face it together." Tears stung Dumo's eyes as he met his friend's gaze. "How do you find the strength, Kofi? How do you accept the weight of the world on your shoulders and keep moving forward?" Kofi smiled softly, his eyes warm with understanding. "We carry the weight because we must. We protect what we love. That is the only way to live, Dumo. And it is the only way to honor the legacy of Nia and the love you share for her." Dumo's heart ached as he thought of Nia, the beautiful mermaid who had given everything to protect their love, to protect the future of their people. She had been the key to Ekara's survival, and now it was his turn to fulfill the prophecy. The future of his kingdom, his child, and the world rested on his shoulders. He turned back to the crystal. Its light pulsed again, almost as if it was calling to him, urging him to make the choice. To face the darkness, to protect the child, and to fulfill the prophecy. Dumo took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the crystal. His heart was torn, and the fear of what was to come nearly overwhelmed him. But he could not stop now. The prophecy had guided him here, to this moment. And though he knew the sacrifice it required, he also understood that there was no turning back. To save his people, to protect the child, he had to make the ultimate choice. He raised the crystal above his head, and as he did, a surge of ancient energy flowed through him. The air around him crackled with magic, the very walls of the temple seeming to hum with the power of generations past. The magic was alive, alive within him, within the child, within the land and sea. "The child," Dumo whispered, as if speaking to the very essence of the prophecy. "I will protect you, no matter the cost. I swear it on my life, on the life of the sea, and on the land of Ekara." As he spoke, the ground beneath his feet trembled. The temple responded, its ancient power resonating with his words. The crystal in his hand began to glow with blinding intensity, its light casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Kofi stepped back, shielding his eyes from the radiance. "Dumo, what are you doing?" Dumo's voice was firm, resolute. "I am fulfilling the prophecy. The sacrifice is mine to make. But through this, Ekara will be saved." The air seemed to hold its breath as the magic surged around Dumo. The crystal pulsed once more, and in that moment, Dumo felt as though he was being pulled into another world. The darkness that had loomed over Ekara was now at his doorstep, and it was time for him to face it. Outside, the shadow army continued to press forward, its dark power growing stronger with every passing second. The Olarian forces had converged on Ekara's last line of defense, and the land seemed to buckle under the weight of the attack. The jungle, which had once been a sanctuary, was now a battlefield. The ancient trees groaned as though in pain, their roots torn asunder by the force of the dark magic that poured from the enemy ranks. But within the temple, a different kind of energy stirred. Dumo felt the pulse of the crystal in his hand, its light now so bright that it filled the entire chamber. His body trembled as the magic coursed through him. He could feel the prophecy unfolding, the ancient power of Ekara flowing into him like a river. The child, the key to the prophecy, was alive within him, and now he could sense its destiny unfolding before his very eyes. A voice, deep and ancient, echoed through the temple. "The prophecy is fulfilled, Prince Dumo. The sacrifice has been made." As the words rang in his ears, Dumo felt the world shift. The magic was no longer just within him. It was in the air, in the ground, in the very fabric of the universe itself. He had become a conduit for the prophecy, its power was his to wield, but the cost was immense. And as he turned, ready to face the darkness that had followed them, he knew that the battle for Ekra, and for the future, was far from over. Dumo stood in the heart of the temple, the radiant glow of the crystal illuminating his face. His heart raced as the weight of his choices pressed down on him, but he could feel the surge of power within him, a power that was not his own, yet seemed to guide his every thought and movement. This was the prophecy unfolding, the fate of Ekra, and the child's destiny bound together in one final moment. The ground beneath him rumbled once more, and Dumo knew that the battle outside had reached its peak. He could feel the shadow army closing in on the last line of defense, and he knew that it was time. The darkness that had been gathering for centuries was now upon them, and only one thing stood between Ekra and total destruction: the child of land and sea. The prophecy had foretold that this child would be the savior, but not without sacrifice. The crystal in his hand pulsed again, as if urging him forward. He had to go now. There was no more time. "Dumo, are you sure about this?" Kofi's voice echoed in the vast temple chamber. "Once you unleash this power, there is no going back. The sacrifice will be complete." Dumo turned to face his loyal friend, his expression softening. "I've made my choice, Kofi. The prophecy is clear. The darkness must be stopped, and Ekra must survive. This is the only way. But I need you to protect the child. Take them to safety, no matter what happens." Kofi's eyes filled with concern. "I will not abandon you, Dumo. I promise me, Kofi," Dumo interrupted, his voice firm but filled with a depth of emotion. "Promise me that you will protect them. The child's safety is the only thing that matters now." Kofi hesitated for a moment, then nodded solemnly. "I promise. But I will never forget what you've done for Ekra, my friend." Without another word, Dumo turned back to the crystal. As his fingers tightened around it, he felt the magic surge once more, filling every fiber of his being. The prophecy, the child, the land, and the sea, all were bound in this single act. He closed his eyes, offering up a silent prayer to the spirits of Ekra, to Nia, and to the unborn child whose fate rested in his hands. As Dumo raised the crystal high above his head, the temple seemed to hold its breath. The light from the crystal grew blinding, illuminating every corner of the chamber. The ancient carvings on the walls seemed to pulse with life, their deep grooves glowing as though they were awakening after centuries of slumber. The air around Dumo crackled with energy, and for a brief moment, it felt as though the very earth beneath him was shaking. A powerful wind began to swirl around the temple, and the stone pillars groaned in response, as though the very foundation of Ekra was being tested. Dumo felt the power surge within him, and then, with a deep breath, he unleashed it. A beam of light shot from the crystal, piercing the ceiling of the temple and reaching high into the heavens. The force of it sent a shockwave through the jungle, and from within the jungle, the sounds of the battle outside seemed to falter. The shadow army's advance slowed as the light from the temple illuminated the battlefield, pushing back the encroaching darkness. The air hummed with ancient energy, and Dumo could feel the prophecy coming to life. The sacrifice he had made, his very soul intertwined with the magic of Ekra, was now complete. In that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. But then, something unexpected happened. From the center of the light, a figure emerged. It was not Dumo, nor the child. It was Nia. Her form shimmered before him, the mermaid's body glowing with an ethereal radiance. Her long, flowing hair billowed around her, and her eyes, filled with love and sorrow, locked onto Dumo's. "Dumo," her voice whispered, like a song carried on the wind. "You've done it. You fulfilled the prophecy." Dumo staggered back in shock. "Nia. But how? I thought you were." "I was lost, Dumo," Nia said softly, her voice filled with both pain and understanding. "But the prophecy brought me back. It wasn't just the child's destiny, it was ours. We are bound together, by the sea and by the land, forever." Dumo reached out toward her, his heart torn between joy and sorrow. "But what about the child? What about the darkness? We still have to fight." Nia smiled, her eyes filled with a deep wisdom that seemed to transcend time. "The battle is not yet over, Dumo. but you have already won. The child will rise, and the darkness will fall. Together, we will see the prophecy fulfilled. As Nia spoke, the temple seemed to pulse with life. The light from the crystal continued to radiate outward, its glow illuminating the entire jungle. The air around Dummo crackled with magic, and he felt the presence of the child who was the key to Ekura's future, awakening within him. And then, as if responding to Nia's presence, the child moved. Dummo gasped, his hands trembling as he placed them on his own chest. The child, they're alive. His voice was filled with awe and wonder. Nia nodded, her expression tender. Yes, Dummo. The child is the key to the prophecy. They carry both the land and the sea within them. It is through their strength that Ekura will survive. But you must protect them until the time is right. Dummo's eyes filled with determination. I will. I will protect them with my life. At that moment, the jungle outside seemed to fall silent. The shadow army had halted, their dark figures still and unmoving as though bound by an unseen force. The air was thick with anticipation. Dummo turned to Kofi, who had been watching from the doorway, his expression filled with awe. Kofi, take the child. Lead them to safety. Kofi nodded, his face serious. But what about you, Dummo? You cannot fight alone. The shadow army is too powerful. I'm not alone, Dummo said firmly. Nia is with me. The prophecy has given us the power we need to defeat the darkness. We will do it together. With those final words, Dummo turned back to Nia, his heart filled with both love and resolve. The time had come to fulfill the prophecy, and to fight for the future of Ekura, for the child, and for the land and the sea. The jungle seemed to tremble as Dummo and Nia stood united, their combined power now a force that could not be denied. The shadow army, sensing the shift in the air, began to stir once more. The Olarian forces, still under the sorcerer's dark influence, began to advance again, their eyes glowing with the malice of the dark magic that bound them. But this time, it was different. The energy within the temple had awakened something within Dummo, a strength that he had never known before. With Nia by his side, he could feel the power of both the land and the sea coursing through him, ready to be unleashed. The child, still within him, stirred again, their energy a beacon of hope and power. It was time for Ekura's future to be shaped. As Dummo and Nia stepped forward, the light from the crystal blazed once more, and the battle for Ekura was about to begin in earnest. The shadow army surged forward, their eyes glowing with malevolent energy as they marched towards the heart of Ekura. Dummo could feel the dark power of the Olarian soldiers, the force of the sorcerer's magic controlling them. But now, he felt something else within himself, an overwhelming wave of energy, the combined power of the land and the sea, coursing through his veins. Nia's presence beside him made him stronger. Her glowing form pulsed with the energy of the ocean, an ancient magic that could match the darkness in a way nothing else could. She was a part of him now, as much as he was a part of her. Together, they were unstoppable. We must act now, Dummo said, his voice filled with conviction. His hand clenched around the crystal, its light now matching the brightness of the full moon. He could feel the power building, preparing to explode out of him. We cannot let the darkness overtake Ekura. We must destroy it before it consumes everything. Nia nodded, her eyes glowing with the wisdom of the sea. You're right, Dummo. But we must be careful. The sorcerer's magic is powerful. We cannot defeat it with brute strength alone. We need to outsmart him. Let's lead him into the heart of Ekura. There, we can trap him. Dummo agreed, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. We'll use the land itself. The jungle has always been a protector of Ekura. If we channel the energy from the crystal into the earth, we can use the land's power to weaken the sorcerer's hold on the soldiers. With the child's strength, we can turn the tide. They turned to Kofi, who had been watching them silently, a mixture of awe and concern on his face. Kofi, take the child to the jungle's heart. Keep them safe, and make sure no one follows you. Kofi hesitated, his face torn. But what if something happens to you? What if you don't make it? Dummo gave his friend a steady, determined look. You must protect the child, Kofi. Ekura's survival depends on them. The child's power will guide us all. We have to trust in that. Kofi's expression hardened, his loyalty clear. I will, Dumo. But you be careful. With that, Kofi turned and ran into the jungle, carrying the child to safety. The jungle around Dumo and Nia seemed to respond to their presence. The trees swayed in rhythm with the energy building in the air. Dumo could feel the earth beneath him, its power growing stronger as he focused on the crystal in his hand. The light it emitted was no longer just a source of power, it was a conduit, linking him to the very heart of Ekura. Nia closed her eyes, her voice soft as she chanted a rhythm known only to the sea. The air around them rippled, and the water from the nearby river began to rise, swirling in a pattern that mirrored the pulse of the crystal. The power of the land and the sea was coming together, ready to fight the darkness. The sorcerer's army, now within the jungle's reach, stopped in their tracks. They could feel the energy, the shift in the balance, but they could not comprehend what was happening. The Olarian soldiers stood like puppets, their expressions vacant, their minds lost to the sorcerer's dark magic. Now, Dumo whispered to Nia, his voice trembling with urgency. The two of them raised their hands in unison. The crystal in Dumo's hand flared, and the earth around them began to tremble. The trees groaned as the jungle's ancient power surged through them. The crystal's light intensified, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire world held its breath. Then, with a mighty roar, the earth exploded in a burst of energy, sending a shockwave through the jungle. The Olarian soldiers staggered, their magical defenses wavering. The jungle responded, the very roots of the trees twisting and rising from the ground, creating an impenetrable wall between the soldiers and the heart of Ekura. From the shadows, the sorcerer appeared. His dark robe fluttered in the wind, and his eyes glowed with a malevolent light. You think you can stop me, he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. You are nothing but pawns in a game you cannot comprehend. Dumo's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood firm. It is you who are the pawn, sorcerer. You have twisted the power of Ekura, but you cannot control it. This land, this sea, they are alive. They have their own will, and you will not break them. The sorcerer laughed, a cold, harsh sound. You speak of power as if it's a gift to be bestowed, but it is mine to take. I am the master of darkness. You cannot stand against me, not even with your little crystal. Nia stepped forward, her eyes filled with the fury of the ocean. You have no idea what you are facing. You think you control the dark, but the dark is only a reflection of light. It is the light that will defeat you. The sorcerer sneered again, his hands raised in a threatening gesture. A dark cloud began to gather above him, swirling with ominous energy. The sky darkened as if responding to his power. We will see about that. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a bolt of dark energy toward Dumo and Nia, but they were ready. The crystal flared with light, deflecting the sorcerer's attack. The jungle around them seemed to come alive, its roots twisting and turning to shield them from the blow. But the sorcerer was relentless. He continued to unleash wave after wave of dark energy, each more powerful than the last. Dumo could feel the strength of his magic pressing down on him, but he knew that the key to defeating the sorcerer lay within the child. The crystal pulsed in his hand, responding to his thoughts. Dumo closed his eyes, focusing all his energy into it. The child stirred within him, their power growing stronger with each passing moment. The child, the savior of Ekura, was ready. Nia stepped beside him, her voice a soothing whisper as she chanted in the ancient language of the sea. The energy between them swelled, and the ocean itself seemed to rise with them. The power of the land and the sea were now united, and they were ready to face the darkness. With a final surge of power, Dumo and Nia unleashed the full force of the prophecy. The crystal, now glowing brighter than the sun, sent out a wave of energy that spread through the jungle and across the battlefield. The Olarian soldiers, their minds still enslaved by the sorcerer's magic, were struck by the wave. Their eyes flickered, their bodies convulsing as the dark magic that controlled them shattered. The sorcerer, sensing his hold on his army slipping, roared in fury. He raised his hands to the sky, calling on the full might of his dark magic. The ground trembled beneath him as he unleashed a final, devastating attack, one that would have destroyed everything in its path. But Dumo and Nia were ready. The crystal's light grew blinding, and with a force that shook the very heavens, they countered the sorcerer's dark magic. The two powers collided with an earth-shattering crash, the light of the crystal pushing back the darkness, bit by bit. The sorcerer screamed in agony as his own magic turned against him. The dark energy consumed him, and with a final, agonizing howl, he was torn apart by the very darkness he had sought to control. The jungle fell silent. The Olarian soldiers, now free from the sorcerer's influence, dropped to their knees, exhausted and bewildered. The air was thick with the smell of burnt magic and the lingering presence of the battle that had just been fought. Dumo and Nia stood at the center of the chaos, their bodies glowing with the power of the crystal. Together, they had defeated the darkness. Together, they had fulfilled the prophecy. But the battle was not over. The future of Ekara, and the child, was still in their hands. The jungle was still, the oppressive weight of darkness lifted from Ekara's soul. Dumo and Nia stood together, their hands intertwined, gazing at the remnants of the battle. The once ominous dark clouds had cleared, and the sky above now shone with the soft glow of the rising sun. The trees of Ekara swayed gently in the breeze, as if welcoming the dawn of a new era. The Olarian soldiers, freed from the sorcerer's control, looked around in confusion. Many of them dropped their weapons, realizing the lies that had bound them. Dumo could see the fear and regret in their eyes, but he also saw something else, hope. They were no longer under the sorcerer's spell, and they could choose a new path, one of peace. Kofi emerged from the jungle, holding the child safely in his arms. The child, though still young, radiated an energy so pure and bright that it felt as if Ekara itself was being reborn in their presence. The child's power, now fully awakened, had the potential to heal the land, bringing prosperity and balance to both the land and the sea. Dumo approached Kofi and the child, his heart swelling with pride and love. "We've done it," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Ekara will live. And so will the legacy of the prophecy." Nia smiled, her eyes full of quiet joy. "The child is the bridge between the land and the sea, Dumo. They will unite us all, those who live on land, those who live in the water, and those who dwell in between. Together, we will rebuild Ekara stronger than ever before." The two of them turned to face the survivors of the battle, the Olarian soldiers who had been freed and the people of Ekara who had fought valiantly to protect their home. Dumo raised his hands, signaling for silence. "Today," he began, his voice carrying across the clearing, "we stand together. No longer divided by the fear of darkness, we are united by the light of hope." The prophecy was not just about a child, it was about us, about the choices we make and the power we have to change our future. He paused, his eyes meeting Nia's as she stood beside him, her presence a reminder of the strength they had found in one another. "We are the ones who shape Ekara's destiny. Let this be a lesson to all of us, that even in the darkest times, we have the power to bring light. That love, unity, and sacrifice can overcome any darkness." Dumo's voice softened as he looked out over the land he had fought to protect. Ekara is more than just a kingdom. It is a living, breathing part of us all. And as long as we stand together, there is nothing we cannot achieve. Nia nodded. "The land and the sea are one. We must care for them both, for they care for us. The future of Ekara lies in our hands, and we must protect it." The survivors of the battle knelt in respect, understanding the weight of Dumo's words. The darkness was gone, but the real work was just beginning. Ekara would need to heal, and it would need leaders who understood the importance of balance, unity, and love for both the land and the sea. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden light over the jungle and the river, Dumo, Nia, and the child stood together, watching as Ekara began to breathe again. The story of Dumo, Nia, and the child teaches us that no matter how dark or difficult life may seem, there is always hope. When we stand together in unity and work with love and understanding, we can overcome even the most powerful of challenges. The power of love, sacrifice, and unity can bring light to the darkest of times and create a future full of hope and prosperity. We also learn that balance is essential, between the land and the sea, between people and nature. We must respect the world around us and care for it if we want to protect the future of our children and the generations to come. What do you think the most important lesson of this story is? Is it about the power of unity, love, or something else? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more exciting folktales and adventures. Your support helps us keep telling more stories like this.